Chapter 1235. Thanks to the victory in East Africa, the turmoil in Great Xia's court finally subsided. Although the court's methods were hidden, smart people could still see the clues and didn't dare to openly oppose the Supreme Court of Great Xia. All the disturbances turned from bright to dark. Ouyang Shuo was very clear that this kind of ideological struggle couldn't be reversed overnight. Fortunately, Great Xia was still expanding and developing at a high speed. All the hidden dangers could be resolved during development and wouldn't shake the foundation of the dynasty. The rest could only be tested by time. After conquering South Sudan and Kenya, Ouyang Shuo wasn't satisfied. He ordered the African theater of operations to immediately prepare for the next war after a short rest. This time, the targets were Uganda and Tanzania. Uganda was located in East Africa, bordering South Sudan and Kenya. It had a total area of 15 million square kilometers. Most of the territory was located in the East African plateau. There were many lakes, and the average altitude was 1,000 to 1,200 meters. Although it was located on the equator, because of its high terrain, rivers, and lakes, it had abundant rainfall and lush vegetation. It was like spring all year round and was once called the Pearl of Africa by Churchill. Lake Victoria was the world's second largest freshwater lake and Africa's largest. 428 of it was in Uganda. The lake was rich in cotton and coffee, which were also the main exports during the British colonial period. Uganda had a total of 4 million players and 200,000 imperial guard. Then there was Tanzania, which was further south. Tanzania was one of the birthplaces of ancient humans. It was located in East Africa, south of the equator. It was mainly agricultural and had trade contacts with Arabia, Persia, and India. The territory was rich in mineral resources. The main minerals included gold, diamonds, iron, nickel, phosphate, coal, and various gems. It was the fifth largest in Africa. Tanzania had 5 million players and 250,000 imperial guard. Therefore, even if the two countries joined forces, it would be difficult to resist the attack of the Great Xia army. Furthermore, after conquering South Sudan and Kenya, the Great Xia army had a relatively stable rear. Great Xia's biggest enemy in East Africa wasn't in the mainland, but in Europe and America. Fortunately, the European and American dynasties were busy occupying territories in Africa and temporarily had no time to care about Great Xia. Even Egypt and Bantu, the two native dynasties in Africa, were busy expanding. Ouyang Shuo predicted that the 7th year of Gaia would be the year in which the various powers would carve up the African continent. By next year, everything would be settled, and the most brutal period of hegemony would begin. In this way, how could Ouyang Shuo be conservative? He had to advance courageously and use this year's time to expand in East Africa and establish a stable foundation. If not, there would be no fun at all in the 8th year of Gaia. Gaia's 7th year, 3rd month. Other than the battlefield in Africa, there was a stir in the South American continent. As Ouyang Shuo expected, Casillas finally couldn't sit still when the Indian Empire focused on the Argentina area. According to the intelligence obtained by the Black Snake Guards, on March 15, the Spanish dynasty increased 150,000 troops in the Argentina area. Counting the 200,000 troops originally stationed here, Casillas was determined to defend this place. For this reason, the Spanish dynasty even temporarily gave up the fight for the African continent. Casillas was not stupid. He knew that the African continent was being watched by many powerful forces. There were too many wolves but not enough meat. The ones participating in the battle for West Africa were all European dynasties, belonging to the same camp as the Spanish dynasty. There were too many constraints. On the contrary, the South American continent was a big fat piece of meat. More importantly, the South American region was the radiation circle of Spanish cultural tradition. It had a mass base. If he could join forces with the Dawson dynasty and annex all of South America in one fell swoop, the Spanish dynasty would be able to rise to a new level, surpassing their European rivals like the Gaul dynasty. And with the Spanish increasing their troops in the Argentina area, the situation in South America became increasingly complicated. Time entered March. The cold winter was gradually fading away, and the scent of spring began to spread across the wilderness. Outside the capital, on the banks of the Friendship River, willows were swaying, sprouting new green buds that fluttered with the wind. In the wilderness, the green grass was like a carpet. Nameless white flowers quietly bloomed, attracting colorful butterflies. Spring returned to the land. In the past winter, the Mongolian plains in the north, the land of Jingchu in the south, Tubo in the west, and the Great Zhou in the east were experiencing a harsh test of life and death. Hundreds of millions of people were fighting against the cold and hunger. As the winter passed, the ice and snow melted. The corpses of those who froze to death or starved to death appeared one by one. It made people feel numb and sad. For the people in the wilderness, this was the most difficult winter in their memory. There were those who lost their wives, those who lost their families, and those who ate their children. A natural disaster changed the color of the world. Therefore, as the ice and snow melted, in the spring of the 7th year of Gaia, the focus of attention was no longer on the war of the past, but on sowing. People prayed that the weather would be good this year and they would tide over the difficulties. In fact, as early as last year, the battle against hunger had already begun. The land of Huaxia, including the Great Xia, had unanimously ordered the local counties to reclaim the land. It was to ensure a good harvest in the coming year. What made people helpless was that with the arrival of the cold winter, the wilderness was frozen like a stone and could not be plowed at all. Therefore, once the ice and snow melted and the land thawed, the people everywhere could not wait to move out. Taking advantage of the month before the spring sowing, they hurriedly reclaimed the land. In the Great Zhou and other countries, the imperial court did not even hesitate to send out the army to speed up the pace of reclamation. They were racing against time. After the event, some people did not complete the statistics, but this time alone, the land of Huaxia had added more than 100 million mu of farmland. As a result of this, the Great Xia's plan to unify Huaxia was temporarily postponed. There were 3 reasons. Firstly, although the Great Xia had previously purchased a large amount of food, with the expansion of their territory and the rapid increase in population, coupled with the war's consumption, the food reserves in various places were nearing their limit. Ensuring Gaia's 7 years of food production was equally important to the Great Xia. If they chose to start the war at this time, other than mobilizing the regular army, they would have to conscript a large number of laborers to transport rations for the army. This would delay the reclamation of the land and the upcoming spring sowing. The losses outweighed the gains. As a result, the Great Xia had to wait until the end of the spring sowing if they wanted to start the war. Secondly, if the Great Xia were to start the war to unify Huaxia, even if they were victorious, they would only be able to delay the spring sowing and suffer from an extreme lack of food. To put it bluntly, they were heavy burdens. Even with the Great Xia's capabilities, adding such burdens and affecting their own sowing would definitely result in a food shortage. When that happened, the situation might not be under the control of the imperial court. Therefore, if they chose to start the war at the beginning of spring, it would be a classic case of harming others without benefiting themselves. Thirdly, the war in Africa was in full swing, and there could be changes at any time. At this time, in order to ensure that there would be no accidents in the war in Africa, the mainland had to have the ability to support the African theater of operations at any time. It was also unwise to start a war in the mainland. Due to the above points, the war in the Great Xia had to be postponed. Although doing so would give the four-nation alliance a breather, it was the safest choice. Mongolian Empire, Hala and Lin. Just as the Central Plains was busy reclaiming the land, the Mongolian Empire finally made a move. Chapter 1236. The dynasties in the Central Plains could plow in spring, but the Mongolian Empire could only rely on the weather. The winter had just ended, and the Mongolian grasslands were filled with whales. Tens of millions of cows and sheep had died of hunger. The herdsmen were reaching their limit, and if they didn't improve, something big would happen. To the Mongolians, the so-called improvement was to plunder again. Last year, when the Mongolian Empire attacked Western Xia, they were defeated. This made the Mongolian Empire realize how powerful Great Xia was in the Central Plains. They couldn't afford to provoke it. Therefore, the Mongolian Empire decided to change their target to the west. The Persian Empire was connected to the Oghidai Khaganate in the west. The Mongolians were familiar with the Persian Empire. In history, two of the Mongolian Khaganate, the Khanate and the Ili Khaganate, had divided the vast Persian Empire's territory. Therefore, the Mongolian Empire's westward expedition was just the same as before. On the 15th of March, 600,000 Mongolian cavalrymen started their westward expedition under the banner of taking back the old land. They would surely leave a mark in the history of China. Although the current Persian Empire could not be mentioned in the same breath as in the past, with a strong army and vast territory, Genghis Khan was still very confident that he could bite off a piece of fat meat from the enormous Persian Empire. The war between the two empires had begun. On the 18th of March, in the capital, Ouyang Shual was surprised to hear about the Mongolian Empire's westward expedition. According to the information collected by the Black Snake Guards, the Persian Empire had a vast territory. It included the entire Central Asia, half of West Asia, and Pakistan in South Asia. If the overseas territories were not taken into account, Great Xia's current territory was basically equivalent to that of the Persian Empire. Just from this point alone, one could see how powerful the Persian Empire was. The entire Central Asia included Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, as well as the southern part of Kazakhstan. The northern part of Kazakhstan was occupied by the Romanov dynasty. The West Asia included Afghanistan, Iran, Turkey, Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, Kuwait, Yemen, Oman, UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain. Other than Afghanistan and Iran, which belonged to the Persian Empire, the remaining 14 countries belonged to the Arab Empire. Whether it was the Persian Empire or the Arabian Empire, their birth was not because some overlord swept away the others and expanded their territory by destroying other countries. It was more of a kind of alliance between countries. Therefore, during the establishment of the empire, there were very few countries that were destroyed. More than 90% of the players were retained, and the royal guards were also converted into the imperial army relatively smoothly. Between countries, it was more through the bonds of religion and culture that brought them together. Whether it was the Persian Empire or the Arab Empire, they both implemented a city-state system similar to that of ancient Greece. Under the premise of electing a ruler, the city-states enjoyed a certain degree of autonomy. The Arab Empire had 20 million players, and the total number of troops in the empire was 2.7 million. The Persian Empire was even more ridiculous. It had more than 30 million players, and the total number of troops in the empire was close to 4 million. If it wasn't for the Persian Empire's city-state system, Genghis Khan wouldn't have dared to send troops to Persia. It was reported that in view of the worsening global situation and the possibility of a world war breaking out at any time, the two empires were also stepping up their efforts to build a complete empire. Otherwise, they would definitely be eliminated in the future or become cannon fodder. Ouyang Shual predicted that with the Mongolian Empire's expedition to the west, the Persian Empire would speed up its internal coordination and complete its internal restructuring before the Arab Empire. In order to survive, the Mongolian Empire had no choice but to launch an expedition to the west. Their internal defenses would definitely be weak, and logically speaking, this was the best opportunity for Great Xia to attack the Mongolian Empire. After all, they didn't have to worry about disrupting the spring plowing. Some generals had already submitted a memorial to the imperial court, requesting to attack the Mongolian Empire. For example, the commander of the Fengxiang army, Guozi, had submitted a memorial to the imperial court, requesting to launch an attack while the Mongolian Empire's defenses were weak. Even if they couldn't destroy the Mongolian Empire, they could at least weaken the enemy's strength. Ouyang Shuo had always viewed the Mongolian Empire as a formidable enemy, and the Mongolian Empire was one of the greatest obstacles for Great Xia to unify the China region. Even so, Ouyang Shuo still resisted the temptation. No matter what, the Mongolian Empire was a part of China, and taking advantage of the Mongolian Empire would damage Great Xia's image. Furthermore, it would be too short-sighted. Regardless of the Mongolian Empire or the Persian Empire, they were both formidable enemies of Great Xia. If they were to fight to the death and exhaust each other, it would be a good opportunity for Great Xia to watch the tigers fight. Ouyang Shuo had no reason to intervene at this moment. If Great Xia were to declare war on the Mongolian Empire now, it would only cause the Mongolian Empire to give up halfway, and the biggest beneficiary would be the Persian Empire. The failure of the Mongolian Empire's westward expedition was equivalent to being forced into a desperate situation, and the only way for them to survive was to point their vanguard at the Central Plains. A pack of wolves in the grasslands without a path of retreat was extremely terrifying. This was equivalent to harming others without benefiting oneself. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo decided to adopt a defensive stance against the Mongolian Empire and watch from the sidelines before the outcome of the battle between the Mongolian Empire and the Persian Empire was decided. Even so, the Mongolian Empire's westward expedition still created an opportunity for Great Xia. The Mongolian Empire's westward expedition was equivalent to temporarily giving up on the Tufan dynasty, and this was the best opportunity for Great Xia to conquer Tufan. On one hand, the Mongolian Empire's westward expedition greatly reduced the pressure on Great Xia's northern border. On the other hand, if Great Xia were to attack Tufan now, Mongolia would definitely not participate, and there would be no worries. Furthermore, the Tufan dynasty was similar to the Mongolian Empire in that they mainly grazed livestock, with agriculture as a supplement. If they were to launch an attack now, it would not affect the spring sowing, and there would be no worries. All of these created an excellent opportunity for Great Xia to attack the Tufan dynasty. After Xixia submitted to Great Xia, the Tufan dynasty had been maintaining their stance. They did not lower their heads to the Mongolian Empire or Great Xia. They wanted to play a balance between the two. Such actions had long made Ouyang Shuo dissatisfied. Let's see what else the Tufan dynasty can do about the so-called balance. At the thought of that, Ouyang Shuo no longer hesitated. He sent an order to the northwest battlefield and ordered Li Jing to personally lead the Flying Bear army to attack the Tufan dynasty. Li Mu would lead the Soaring Eagle army to defend and be ready to respond at any time. The Tufan dynasty only had 400,000 troops and was no match for the Flying Bear army. They could rely on the plateau terrain, which could easily cause obstacles for the Great Xia army. That was not a problem for Great Xia. In history, Li Jing had once led an expedition to Tuyuhan and had similar combat experience. Moreover, Li Jing had led his troops to the border of Shu for more than 2 years. He had long understood the situation of the Tufan dynasty. At that moment it could be said that the time was right. Chapter 1237. On the 20th day of the 3rd month of the 7th year of Gaia, Li Jing led the Flying Bear army to attack Tubo. It was only at this moment that the Tufan dynasty, who had been watching from the sidelines, panicked. They hurriedly sent an envoy to the capital of Great Xia to discuss the matter of recognizing Great Xia as their suzerain. Unfortunately, it was too late. Since the Great Xia army had set out, it was impossible for them to return empty-handed. Great Zhou Dynasty, Handan City. Even though the harshest part of winter was over and spring was beginning to return, there were still black, gloomy clouds that could not be dispersed within and outside the Great Zhou royal palace. This was a sign that a dynasty was about to fall. In the past winter, Di Chen didn't hold a single court meeting. All the memorials that were handed down were basically decided by peerless Feng Hua and passed down. Only then did it not cause chaos in the court. Facing the mountain-like pressure, Di Chen finally collapsed. In the imperial garden, it was a scene of spring. Di Chen was sitting in the pavilion. His beard was unkempt and he was drunk. He said self-mockingly, "Look, the Xia dynasty has started to act. Today it's Tubo, and tomorrow it'll be our Zhou dynasty. As long as the four-nation alliance still exists, there is still hope," peerless elegance comforted. Four-nation alliance? Di Chen seemed to be drunk, but he was actually very sober. His eyes were full of sarcasm. "We are the frogs in the frying pan, the meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered." Peerless elegance was silent. He sighed and said tentatively, "If it really doesn't work, we can just submit to Great Xia. Haven't Mighty Tyrant and Battle Wolf already taken the lead? It's not necessarily impossible." Di Chen glared at him and said loudly, "You want me to surrender to that old fox? No way. If worst comes to worst, we'll fight to the death." With Di Chen's pride, with the pride of the Di Shi clan, they would never accept surrender. "Then let's prepare for battle." His tone was filled with indescribable loneliness and helplessness. In the blink of an eye, April arrived. The smell of spring was getting stronger. The Central Plains was bustling with the spring sowing season. Be it the war in the distant African continent or the Tubo War at the border, none of them had any effect on the Central Plains. However, on the 5th of April, a shocking case occurred in Great Xia. That afternoon, there was a Wulin sect called the Dagger Society in Minnan Province. Under the banner of "robbing the rich to help the poor," 13 disciples under its command robbed a rich merchant's family in the city named Zhu. 15 people from the Zhu residence, including a 3-year-old girl, all lost their lives. Once the news came out, the entire court was shaken. This was the first time since the founding of Great Xia that someone from the pugilistic world committed a crime and brazenly challenged the laws of Great Xia. When Ouyang Shuo received the report, he was incomparably furious. He ordered the governor of Minnan Province, Xiongba, to personally oversee this case and arrest all the criminals and bring them to justice. If the Minnan Yamen can't solve the case within a week, the Internal Affairs Department will intervene. Although Xiongba had been in office for less than half a year, he felt that he had lost all face when such a big case happened under his rule. He personally reported to the imperial court and said, "If the case cannot be solved in 5 days, I am willing to take the blame and resign." For this reason, Xiongba directly dispatched the Minnan Garrison Regiment and more than 300 elite bailiffs to the small Dagger Society's encampment to arrest them. If he dared to resist, Xiongba would naturally not hesitate to use iron-blooded methods. In front of the power of the imperial court, a small sect like the Small Dagger Society was no different from chickens and dogs. This crime was also caused by a few disciples who were blinded by greed and went down the evil path. In order not to attract disaster, the Small Dagger Society did not dare to be negligent. They sent more than 200 disciples to cooperate with the imperial court to arrest the criminals. In just 3 days, all 13 disciples who committed the crime were arrested. It was only right and proper to pay with one's life. After the Internal Affairs Department of the Minnan Governor's Yamen, they directly sentenced the 13 criminals to death. At the same time, the Small Dagger Society was investigated for their lack of discipline and related joint responsibilities. According to the law, the Small Dagger Society was directly banned and disappeared from the pugilistic world. It was not until the middle of April that this big case that caused an uproar was finally settled. After the execution of the criminals, the governor of Minnan Province, Xiongba, personally went to the Zhu residence to offer condolences and comfort the deceased. Although the matter had passed, the aftermath was still ongoing. Great Xia valued martial arts. There were countless martial arts clubs and sects among the people. It was fine if they obeyed the law, but once greed arose, it would pose a huge threat to the county's security and could explode at any time. It was not just a saying that chivalrous people violated the law with their martial arts. Therefore, after the outbreak of the 4 and 5 major cases, Ouyang Shuo realized that he had to establish an organization at the imperial court level to supervise the pugilistic world and prevent this force from overstepping its boundaries. Of course, this was not an easy task. All martial artists and chivalrous people in the pugilistic world yearned for a free and unrestrained life where they could help others when they saw injustice and fight in the pugilistic world. They were most unwilling to be restrained. Throughout the dynasties, the public officials of such organizations were called the hawks and dogs of the imperial court by the pugilistic world. If Ouyang Shuo was a chivalrous person, he would probably not want the imperial court to interfere in the pugilistic world. However, since he was in a different camp, his way of thinking was naturally different. Ouyang Shuo would never allow such an unrestrained force to exist under his rule. It was imperative to supervise the market. The 4 and 5 major cases was an excellent opportunity to shut the mouths of the pugilistic world. Ouyang Shuo had always been swift and decisive. Since he had made up his mind, he would not hesitate. He immediately issued an edict to establish the martial arts department and appoint a commander to supervise the pugilistic world. Like the Craggy Sea Guards and other organizations, the martial arts department would take orders directly from Ouyang Shuo. Although it was only a department-level organization and the commander was only rank 5, it was a position of great power. Especially for the pugilistic world, it was a position that they could only dream of. To put it bluntly, once the martial arts department was operated with the support of the imperial court, the commander of the martial arts department would be no different from the leader of the pugilistic world. He would have a supreme position in the pugilistic world and could be said to be an uncrowned king. The commander of the martial arts department would be Ouyang Shuo's spokesperson in the pugilistic world. Therefore, when the news of the imperial court establishing the martial arts department spread, many people were interested in this position. Even the leaders of some super sects volunteered themselves. Ouyang Shuo was clear that the martial arts department was like an unsheathed sword. If used well, it could help the imperial court effectively supervise the pugilistic world. However, if it was handed over to someone with ulterior motives, it could backfire. If not handled well, it could nurture an ambitious person. Therefore, the martial arts department had to be handed over to someone who was both capable and absolutely reliable. If Song Jia had not retreated behind the scenes, she would be the most suitable candidate. Ouyang Shuo could only settle for the next best thing, which was to ask Aunt Lin Jing to take care of her. However, Lin Jing was still the commander of the Yulin Royal Guards, which was also very important. Especially since the Yulin Royal Guards had just been established, Lin Jing was learning the art of war and how to fight with the help of the famous General Tang He. It was the most crucial time and he could not leave. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo thought of a compromise. He decided to appoint Lin Yu, an elder of the Eastern Hedge Sword faction, to temporarily hold the position of the commander of the martial arts department. Chapter 1238. In April of Gaia's 7th year, other than establishing the martial arts department, Ouyang Shuo was also paying close attention to the latest developments in military technology. After a year of industrialization, the dynasty's military industry welcomed another major breakthrough. The most eye-catching performance was in the field of strategic weapons and equipment. In the naval field, Great Xia's first ironclad warship was finally launched in the North Sea Bay. The first ironclad warship was a wooden warship with a thick layer of metal armor to defend against attack. It was equipped with a large number of cannons and was 23 meters long and 13 meters wide. Great Xia had already successfully developed the first ironclad warship in the 5th year of Gaia. As the warship was not very practical, it was not installed in the Navy on a large scale. The second ironclad warship transformed into a steel battleship and cruiser equipped with cannons. It was close to the level of modern warships of the 20th century. In April of Gaia's 7th year, Great Xia's first ironclad warship was born. The creation of this warship was attributed to the development of heavy cannons, the more advanced steam engines, and the rapid advancement of Great Xia's metallurgical technology, which made shipbuilding possible. Apart from cannons, ironclad warships were equipped with torpedoes, which became the key weapons in naval warfare. Due to the maturation of ironclad warship manufacturing technology, coupled with Gaia's increasing openness to industrial technology, ironclad warships would replace sailing battleships in the next few years. In order to maintain maritime supremacy, the imperial court had to mass-produce ironclad warship. The problem was that the construction cost of an ironclad warship was not low. Just one ironclad warship cost up to 1,000,000 gold coins, and the construction period was as long as half a year. In history, the Qing dynasty had to grit their teeth to purchase 2 first-class ironclad warships. Of course, the ironclad warships designed by Great Xia could not compare to first-class warships like the Dingyuan. It was for no other reason than the lack of generators. Of course, the cannons could not compare to the cannons that could rotate 360 degrees. To build ironclad warships on a large scale, many shipyards were required to start construction at the same time. Since Gaia's first year, Great Xia had been building shipyards at various ports. Currently, there were 16 shipyards of varying sizes. This was how they had a large number of fortress warships and Z-1 warships installed in the naval fleet. The problem was that these shipyards were used to build wooden warships. Only the North Sea Shipyard, which was the territory's first shipyard, had the ability to build ironclad warships. For this reason, the imperial court had to upgrade the remaining 15 large shipyards. As Gaia had already removed the blurring function, just this alone would take more than half a year. Just the budget for the modification of the shipyard was as high as 3,000,000 gold coins. Coupled with the cost of building the ironclad warships, the budget was almost sky-high. Even so, Ouyang Shua had to grit his teeth and decided to equip the Indian Ocean Fleet and the Pacific Fleet with 2 ironclad warships as their main battleship. In the future, adjustments would be made according to the situation. In addition to naval equipment, there was also a major breakthrough in Air Force equipment. Of course, strictly speaking, Great Xia didn't have an air force in the true sense of the word. They were only equipped with flying brigades or flying squadrons in their fleets and army groups, and they relied on the mimicry aircraft. Although the mimic flying device was good, its shortcomings were obvious. Firstly, they relied too much on the magnetite ore for energy, which limited the number of mimic aircraft. Secondly, the energy circuit used the engraving technology of the Atlantis civilization. The degree of industrialization of the aircraft was very low, and it was not even suitable to be used as a fighter. The 7th Research Institute had been working on these 2 shortcomings. Finally, this month, the 7th Research Institute had a substantial breakthrough. Combining the manufacturing technology of the mimic flying device, they were the first to develop the first generation of fighter aircraft. The first generation of fighter aircraft used the hybrid power of the magnetite ore and the internal combustion engine. They complemented each other and could be used to guide artillery fire, reconnaissance, and bombing on the battlefield. Although there was still a gap between it and a real fighter aircraft, it was already very impressive. Most importantly, after the adoption of hybrid power, it laid the foundation for the mass production of fighter aircraft. It was also the most solid step for Great Xia to nurture a real air force. Ouyang Shua believed that one day, a real air force would appear in the Great Xia army. Finally, there was the land combat equipment. In the second half of last year, Ouyang Shua made a trip to Atlantis City to discuss a big deal with Kalia to purchase the combat puppet technology that was unique to the Atlantis civilization. At present, the Great Xia arsenal had already built the first prototype of the combat puppet. After a period of time, they would be able to produce a real combat puppet. By then, the Great Xia army would have a strategic weapon and equipment. The rapid development of technology was undoubtedly a symbol of the dynasty's prosperity. When these strategic weapons and equipment were fully developed and entered the mass production stage, the Great Xia army was bound to usher in another transformation and take off. Supporting all of this was the rapid advancement of industrialization. Only by advancing industrialization and laying out the entire industrial chain would they have the conditions to produce complex industrial equipment like the combat puppet and the first generation of fighter aircraft. Without the countless spare parts factories, all of this would be a castle in the air. And supporting the deepening of industrialization of Great Xia was the planned new district of the capital. On April 1, the imperial court announced the master plan for the capital's new district to the public. It announced that the new district would prioritize the layout of research institutions, factories, and supporting workshops related to the military industry. The development of commerce was secondary. The combat puppet, the first generation of fighter aircraft, and other strategic weapons and equipment were the core of the new district. Ouyang Shuo knew that if one did not sacrifice the child, one would not be able to trap the wolf. The game had evolved to the 7th year of Gaia, and the gap between the individual combat power of the various armies was rapidly shrinking. Even if the Great Xia soldiers were the best of the best, it was impossible for them to fight 1 against 5. The only thing that allowed the Great Xia army to continue to maintain an advantage, other than the terrifying size of the army, was the constant upgrading of weapons and equipment, as well as the accompanying tactical strategies. Only in this way could the Great Xia army remain undefeated and support the dynasty's continued expansion. The huge investment at this moment was to lay a solid foundation for the Great Xia army to surpass the dynasty for the second time. No matter how difficult it was or how much money was required, Ouyang Shuo had to grit his teeth and persevere. If he was unwilling to invest now, he might be beaten up if his technology lagged behind in the future. It was because of this strategic consideration that Ouyang Shuo focused his energy on the reorganization of the dynasty and technological research and development in the first half of the 7th year of Gaia. He didn't pay much attention to the few wars initiated by the imperial court. The game world was constantly changing, and there was no room for slacking or short-sightedness. If one was careless and conservative, it could be a huge hidden danger in the future. To resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify the internal affairs. Chapter 1239. April was coming to an end, but the two wars that Great Xia had with the outside world had different results. In Africa, the Great Xia army was once again divided into two groups, but they were still unstoppable. In addition, the people of South Sudan and Kenya, which had just been conquered by Great Xia, received relief food from the imperial court. Be it Uganda or Tanzania, the people of the two countries did not completely hate the Great Xia army. This provided the Great Xia army with a basis of public opinion and did not fall into the sea of people's war. Bai Qi was obviously very experienced in the operation of food. It was certainly not a coincidence that the people of Uganda and Tanzania were able to know about the disaster relief situation in South Sudan and Kenya. There was a careful plan behind it. In view of this, Ouyang Shuo was very assured about the battlefield in Africa. What was unusual was the battlefield of Tubo that had already started fighting. According to the analysis before the war, with the Flying Bear army led by Li Jing, the Tubo army was definitely not a match for them. Even if they fought in the highlands, they could still defeat them in one battle. However, the real situation was not like that. According to the battle report from Li Jing, there was a hidden force behind the Tubo dynasty. Although those who fought with the Flying Bear army were wearing Tubo uniforms, they were definitely not the Tubo army. This was very interesting. In view of this, Ouyang Shuo ordered Li Jing that there was no need for time pressure. The imperial court did not set a clear time limit for the Tubo War. Li Jing was allowed to use his troops flexibly according to the situation on the battlefield. It was obviously not a good idea for the Great Xia army to rashly launch an all-out attack before figuring out which force was behind the Tubo army. Moreover, there were many towering mountains and lofty ridges in the Tubo region, and the terrain was complicated. They could be ambushed at any time, so they had to be even more careful. The Tubo War was in a stalemate just like that. In April, apart from Great Xia, there were new changes in the global situation. Of course, the most lively place was the Asian region, where there was a life-and-death battle between the Mongolian and Persian empires. Right at the start of the battle, they relied on the element of surprise and their determination to fight to the death. Coupled with their act of massacring the cities, the Mongolian cavaliers ravaged the cities of the Persian Empire again and took down several cities. A large number of resources and people were continuously transported back to the Mongolian Empire. The magnificent feat of the Mongolian expedition in history was repeated again. However, the game was not history. After losing the battle, the powerful Persian Empire quickly recovered and fought back. The battle between the two sides had just begun. On the 10th day of the 4th month, in order to relieve the Mongolian Empire of their worries, Ouyang Shua specially sent a messenger to Halakorin to inform Genghis Khan that Great Xia would not attack Mongolia during the period of the Mongolian Empire's westward expedition. When Genghis Khan received the news, he had a complicated expression on his face. Although he had seen through Ouyang Shua's plan, he had no choice but to accept this favor. He decisively gave up his guard against Great Xia and threw himself into the Battle of Persia. Because this was an overt plot. During this period of time, some of the Mongolian nobles were worried that this was a ploy by Great Xia. Their goal was to make the empire lower its guard and then send troops to invade. The Han people are the most cunning and cannot be trusted. This was especially so for the nobles whose fiefs bordered Great Xia. They were constantly on tenterhooks, afraid that the empire would withdraw their border guards and put their interests in danger. Genghis Khan, however, did not think so. He said bluntly, as the most powerful monarch of the Central Plains, Emperor Xia's words carry enormous weight. How could he easily go back on his word? You don't have to worry. Between kings there should be some form of appreciation. Genghis Khan was clear-headed. Whether it was in terms of plundering rations or expanding their territory to the Mongolian Empire, a westward expedition was the best choice. Therefore, even if they won a great victory in the early stages and seized a large amount of resources, which had already alleviated the hunger within the empire, Genghis Khan was still prepared to continue fighting against the Persian Empire. Firstly, he could train his troop. Secondly, he could use war to nurture war. To the Mongolian Empire, they were mainly nomadic and their agriculture was underdeveloped. There was no need to talk about industry, commerce, or industrial revolution. It was impossible for the empire to establish such a complicated system. If the empire did not want to be eliminated, it could only nurture war through war. Only by conquering the Persian Empire, occupying the Persian states, and turning the Persians into slaves of the Mongolian Empire, would they be able to establish a system that would allow the Mongolian Empire to have a foothold. Sometimes, barbarism and violence were also a way out. Therefore, after Ouyang Shua made his promise, Genghis Khan decisively gave up on his plan to plunder and leave in Persia. He shifted the strategic focus of the empire to the west. The confrontation between the two empires would probably continue for a long time. Other than the confrontation between the Mongolian Empire and the Persian Empire, there was another place in the world that was very lively. It was the continent of South America that had been forgotten by everyone. As the Spanish dynasty increased their troops in the Argentine region, the situation in South America quickly heated up, and the smell of gunpowder was thick. In mid-April, the Indian Empire finally decided not to endure any longer and took the initiative to attack the Argentine region. In the first battle, the Indian Empire gave the Indian Empire a severe warning. In the face of the skilled Spanish firearms tactics, the Indian army, which mainly relied on cold weapons, was obviously unable to resist. In the first large-scale battle between the two sides, they suffered heavy losses. The Indian Empire advocated pure warriors and wanted to return to the Indian tradition. They wanted to use the spears and bows in their hands to defend the glory of the empire. Unfortunately, what they tasted was a bloody lesson. A major battle had undoubtedly exposed the fatal weakness of the Indian Empire. The sweetness of victory had completely aroused the desire to conquer in the bones of the Spanish dynasty. They were obviously no longer satisfied with defending the Argentine region. It was reported that the Spanish were already planning to counterattack the Indian Empire. At the same time, the setback of the Indian Empire on the southern front had given the Brasilia dynasty confidence. They agreed to cooperate with the Dawson dynasty almost without hesitation. The purpose was to let the Dawson dynasty provide them with firearms and train them with gunmen. In this way, the Dawson dynasty would be able to smoothly intervene in the war in South America. Jack would probably wake up laughing in his dreams. There was no reason for him to refuse. Given Jack's ability, it was only a matter of time before he controlled the Brasilia dynasty. At the end of April, the Spanish dynasty and the Brasilia dynasty officially formed an alliance, determined to eat up the Indian Empire together and divide it up. Ouyang Shuo, however, saw through the trick at a glance. On the surface, it seemed to be an alliance between the Spanish dynasty and the Brasilia dynasty, but in reality, it was an alliance between the Spanish dynasty and the Dawson dynasty. The Silver Hand was fully planning for South America. Even under such circumstances, the three dynasties seemed to have consciously forgotten about the Great Xia dynasty. They were neither particularly afraid of the Great Xia dynasty, nor did they confront it head-on. They were consciously weakening the presence of the Great Xia in South America. The logic behind this was, of course, fear of the powerful strength of the Great Xia. Both Jack and Casillas were worried that the Great Xia would use this opportunity to send more troops to South America, adding unnecessary variables to their plans. During this period, the Indian Empire neither asked for more troops from the Great Xia dynasty, nor did they ask for help in firearms or musketeer training. It seemed that they still wanted to resist. Since this was the case, Ouyang Shuo naturally wouldn't take the initiative to mention this matter. In the South American battlefield, Ouyang Shuo had plenty of patience. He directly ordered the Uruguay provincial governor, Wolf Warrior, to lie low for the time being and gather intelligence in South America, including the Indian Empire. According to Ouyang Shuo's judgment, this was definitely not the time for the Great Xia to intervene in South America. 1st of May, King City, Jingshi. By the end of May, the spring sowing had already ended, and the wilderness had become lush green and full of vitality. This also meant that the time for the war to unify China had arrived, and it couldn't be delayed any longer. If it was delayed any longer, it would be the first harvest season, which would give the enemy a chance to catch their breath. According to Ouyang Shuo's expectations, by the end of May, the Tubo War should have been settled. In this way, the Great Xia dynasty could go all out and plan for the war to unify China. Now that such an unforeseen event had occurred, the war couldn't be delayed any longer. On this day, Ouyang Shuo officially announced that the war to unify China would begin immediately, and the first target would be the Great Zhou dynasty. The relevant battle plan had already been formulated by the Grand Council last winter. The entire army was on standby, waiting for Ouyang Shuo's signal. Chapter 1240. Following Ouyang Shuo's order, Great Xia's war machine quickly began to operate. On the 5th day of the 5th month, Sun Bin led the brave Tiger Army north from the border of the East Sea province, brazenly killing his way into the Great Zhou dynasty's Ludong province, opening the prelude to the Great Xia's conquest of the Great Zhou dynasty. The next day, Yu Fei led the northern frontier army westward from the border of the northern frontier province, heading straight for the hinterland of the capital province of the Zhou dynasty. At the same time, Zhuozongtong led the Hudong army to advance from Hudong province, cooperating with the northern frontier army to launch a pincer attack from the east and west. The Great Xia dynasty only dispatched these three army groups. The remaining forces, including the Imperial Guard garrisoned in the capital, the Leopard Army and the Xiangjiang Army in the southeast war zone, and the Soaring Eagle Army garrisoned in the Western Sea Province, were all biding their time. Only the Soaring Phoenix Army stationed in Vast Gold Province arranged for a legion to head south and station in Northern Frontier Province. The purpose of doing this was very obvious. It was to intimidate the Qin, Tang, and Song kingdoms. Among the three kingdoms, no matter which kingdom sent reinforcements to Great Zhou, they would face the invasion of Great Xia. The Soaring Eagle Army monitored Great Qin, the Leopard Army monitored Great Tang, and the Xiangjiang Army and Yulin Royal Forest Army monitored Great Song. It wasn't hard to see that out of the three armies that Great Xia had arranged to attack Great Zhou, two of them belonged to the border defense system. However, the ones that were arranged to monitor the three states were top-notch elite troops. His intention couldn't be any clearer. In this way, the so-called alliance of the four countries had in fact been dismembered. If they rescue Great Zhou, they will not be able to protect their homeland. If they do not rescue Great Zhou, they will not be able to protect Great Zhou. Once Great Zhou was destroyed, Great Xia would continue to carry out the strategy of breaking them down one by one. Therefore, this was a dead knot. No matter how it changed, the four-nation alliance seemed to be unable to escape the fate of destruction. The root cause of the current situation was the powerful military strength of the Xia kingdom. Of course, if the Flying Bear army led by Li Jing had already attacked Tubo, the plan would be more stable. Speaking of which, Ouyang Shua still had to thank the Mongolian Empire. If it wasn't for the fact that the Mongolian Empire was completely engulfed in the Persian War, the Northern Frontier Army and Hudong Army wouldn't have dared to put in all their effort to destroy Zhou. Genghis Khan was using Ouyang Shua, and Ouyang Shua was also using Genghis Khan. May 7, Ludong Province, Peng City. As the former West Chu capital, Peng City was the largest city in the East Lu Province, as well as the administrative center of the province. At the same time, the city was also the headquarters of the Great Zhou's Danyang Army. Speaking of the Danyang Army, their fates were full of troubles. First, the army lost tens of thousands of soldiers on the battlefield of the Great Jin dynasty. Not only did they not receive effective reinforcements, but they were also forced to transfer tens of thousands of elite soldiers away when Di Chun reorganized the royal army. Only when they arrived at Ludong province did they transfer a large number of new soldiers from the reserves to make up for the lack of soldiers. With such a heavily damaged army, they couldn't even compare to the border guards of Great Xia, let alone the brave Tiger Army which was as ferocious as wolves. Lord Chunshin, the actual controller of the Danyang Army, did not have the slightest confidence in defending the Ludong province. However, Di Chun had given a strict order for the Danyang Army to hold their ground. Di Chun was forced to do this. Once the Ludong province fell, the Great Zhou dynasty would have no buffer zone, and they would die for sure. Peng City was close to the border of Ludong province, and was only a short distance away from Donghai province. Therefore, on the second day after the brave Tiger Army invaded the Ludong province, the two sides started a bloody battle along the long border of the province, with Peng City as the fulcrum. In the past winter, the Great Zhou dynasty, despite being short of soldiers and people, still used the army and a large number of laborers to strengthen the fortifications at the border. After losing the barrier of Donghai province, the Ludong province became even more important. It was reported that in just one winter, the number of laborers who died at the construction sites at the border of Donghai province was no less than 2,000. Under the pressure of Di Chun, the people of the Great Zhou dynasty were close to their limit. This time, in the face of the Great Xia's attack, in order to protect the logistics, they used a large number of laborers, causing the heavens to be angry and the people to be resentful. Even if the Great Xia did not attack, the Great Zhou dynasty was actually on the verge of collapse. It was not that a little bit of food had forced the Great Zhou dynasty into a dead end. Food was just a fuse. What really caused the Great Zhou dynasty to fall into such a predicament was the system that it had always relied on to survive in the wilderness. As everyone knew, the Great Zhou dynasty was founded by the aristocratic families. After the Great Zhou dynasty was established, apart from the 4 great families, there were more than 30 small and medium-sized families that depended on them. Together, they formed the foundation of the Great Zhou dynasty. From the important departments of the Great Zhou dynasty to the profitable commercial fields, they were all controlled by the aristocratic families. The aristocratic families were the foundation of the Great Zhou dynasty. Without the support of these aristocratic families, no matter if it was the earliest 6 hegemons of Handan or the mid-stage Yan-Huang alliance, or the current Great Zhou dynasty, they would not be able to stand out. For territories like Handan City to be able to survive in the wilderness, it was because of the large number of talents and funds provided by the aristocratic families that they could support, so that they would not fall behind Shanghai City at that time. But don't forget, the nature of the aristocratic families was greed. Naturally, there would be rewards for their efforts. After the establishment of the Great Zhou dynasty, in the eyes of the aristocratic families, they had already established an invincible foundation in the wilderness. It was time to reap the fruits of victory. Dividing the power of the Great Zhou dynasty and competing with the people in the commercial fields were all very normal things. There were even those who relied on their family's meritorious status to commit crimes in the imperial court, disregarding human life, which happened from time to time. If not for the suppression of Di Chun and the others, even crazier things could have happened. Di Chun envied the Great Xia dynasty for being able to implement the rule of law, but he could not imitate it, because it could not be carried out. The past winter was a heavy disaster for the people of the Great Zhou dynasty, but it was a feast for the aristocratic families. They hoarded goods, bought low and sold high, and plundered the wealth of the people. Originally, the aristocratic families were also rational and would not kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. The problem was, with the achievement points constantly being updated, and the Great Zhou dynasty in danger of being destroyed at any time, these aristocratic families could no longer hold back and wanted to use the last bit of time to plunder resources and exchange them for achievement points. Everything else was fake, only the achievement points were the most real. For this, they did not hesitate to eat up the entire Great Zhou dynasty, and even incited a rebellion among the people, sending troops to suppress them. In the eyes of the aristocratic families, NPCs were a pile of data, a tool for them to plunder achievement points. Who, I ask, has pity for a worker? Just as the Great Xia dynasty sent troops to attack the Great Zhou dynasty, the situation had already developed to a point where it could no longer be remedied. Within the 2 provinces there was a tense atmosphere that made people feel uneasy. Although Di Chun knew that the aristocratic families were detestable, he was powerless to stop them. Therefore, it was not only the small and medium-sized aristocratic families that went crazy. Many members of the Di family themselves participated in this feast, and they were eating the fattest piece of meat. As such, what position did Di Chun have to restrain the other aristocratic families? This was also one of the reasons why Di Chun was depressed throughout the winter, because the Great Zhou dynasty was no longer under his control. This was such a tragedy. Chapter 1241. As the front line was filled with smoke and the flames of war raged, the rear of the Great Zhou dynasty could no longer be suppressed. In the past winter, the people of the Great Zhou dynasty, who had been living in misery, slowly accumulated their anger and resentment towards the aristocratic families in their hearts. Like a trickling stream, they gathered into a volcano, ready to erupt at any time and destroy everything. The war had finally allowed this volcano to find a point to erupt. On the 10th day of the 5th month, the valiant General Qin Xiong led the 4th Corps of the brave Tiger Army. After a series of battles, they were the first to break through the defensive line of the Danyang army from the west and entered the hinterland of the Ludong province. Once the gap was opened, it could no longer be plugged. In the next few days, Red Eagle led the 2nd Corps, and the 3rd Corps led by Zhao Shi broke through the defensive line of Ludong province from the east and followed them into the hinterlands. The success of the left and right wings made Sun Bin feel much more at ease. He calmly commanded the 1st Corps and the 5th Corps to guard the middle road and stall the main force of the Scarlet Yang army. According to Sun Bin's plan, he would arrange for the left and right flanks to outflank Pengcheng, and then cooperate with the Central Army to encircle the Red Sun Army, gradually nibbling away at the enemy and forcing them into a desperate situation. Although the Danyang Army had the geographical advantage, and their commander, Tian Dan, was also a famous general, they were not strong enough. More importantly, the army was short of rations and fodder, and could not last long. It was precisely because Sun Bin saw through the enemy's weakness that he adopted the siege tactic. After a long stalemate, the Danyang army could only surrender when Ping City ran out of provisions. But what happened next completely changed the direction of the war. After the two armies broke through the defensive line, they did two things. First, they would continue to expand the battle result. They would cooperate with each other from the inside and outside, continuously widening the gap that they had opened. Then, they would completely destroy the entire section of the enemy's defensive fortifications to relieve their worries. The second was to send out a vanguard force to occupy the cities around Ping City and establish a stronghold. On the 13th day of the 5th month, the 1st Division of the 4th Corps of the brave Tiger Army, as the vanguard of the left wing, was ordered to arrive at Xiapi City, preparing to capture the city and use it as the forward base of the left wing. Xiapi City was located in the northwest corner of Ping City. It was the only way to reach Ping City. Although it was just a county, the city was very strong. Moreover, there were 6,000 soldiers of the Danyang army stationed in the city. It was not easy to attack. The result was out of everyone's expectations. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the 1st Division launched an attack on Xiapi City. The earth-shattering battle spread from the top of the city wall all the way into the city, evoking the already restless emotions of the citizens in the city. When it was close to noon, when the two armies were fighting fiercely, a group of mobs suddenly rushed into the county office, injured the runners, detained the county magistrate, and raised the flag of resistance against the great Zhou dynasty. Affected by this, the entire Xiapi city was in a mess. The sudden riot spread rapidly from the county government. Seeing that the county government had fallen, more and more people joined in the riot. They opened the granaries and looted the shops. As the riot spread to the area near the city wall, the Danyang city guards panicked. They didn't know if they should suppress the riot or defend the city wall first. Upon seeing this, the Great Xia army launched an even more ferocious attack. Without logistical support, the Danyang army suffered heavy losses. Both sides fought fiercely until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The surviving Danyang army had no choice but to surrender. The city of Xiapi was conquered by the Xia dynasty in one day. The biggest contributor was the mob at the beginning. The great Zhou dynasty finally paid the price for their cruel rule. And this was just the beginning. The riot in Xiapi was like a small flame that completely ignited the anger of the people of the great Zhou dynasty. Encouraged by this, more than 10 riots broke out in the Ludong province within a day. As a result of this, wherever the great Xia army went, the cities surrendered at the mere sight of them. After receiving the news, Sun Bin made a prompt decision. He ordered the armies on the left and right wings not to besiege Pengcheng, but to immediately lead the army north and take advantage of the hard-earned popular support to conquer the whole territory of Ludong. It had to be said that Sun Bin's decision was very wise. In the following week, The armies on the left and right wings of the brave Tiger Army were like two giant dragons that plunged into the hinterland of Ludong Province. Responding to the riots everywhere, they conquered one city after another. The riots provided assistance to the Great Xia Army in besieging the cities. The arrival of the Great Xia Army further encouraged the riots and intimidated the county yamen as well as the local garrisons. Both sides promoted each other like a rolling snowball. They rapidly conquered more than half of Ludong's territory at the speed of several cities per day. In the end, seeing that the war situation was good, the armies on the left and right wings again divided their troops into divisions and rapidly advanced to the north. The speed of the siege was greatly increased. On the 20th of May, apart from the surroundings of Pengcheng, the whole of Ludong Province belonged to the Great Xia. The upheaval was too sudden. Lord Chunshan was so scared that his face turned pale. He gritted his teeth and simply ordered the main force of the Danyang army to withdraw into Pengcheng. Following that, Lord Chunshan took the initiative to contact Ouyang Shua and requested to submit to the Great Xia. Looking at Lord Chunshan in the video, Ouyang Shua had a complicated expression. Lord Chunshan, who was once proud and arrogant and regarded him as his archenemy, was now only respectful. The nature of a businessman allowed Lord Chunshan to quickly let go of the pride in his heart. This call not only concerned Lord Chunshan's fate, but also the fate of the entire clan. If Ouyang Shua insisted on not accepting Lord Chunshan's submission, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for their clan. Their 6 years of hard work would all turn into bubbles. "Give me a reason to accept your submission," Ouyang Shua said indifferently. Lord Chunshan's heart trembled. He forced a smile and said, "The main force of the Danyang army still exists. If we defend Pengcheng to the death, the Great Xia will also have to pay a huge price. Both sides will suffer. This is not what you wish to see, right?" Ouyang Shua smiled. "This may not be so. I wonder how many days of rations Pengcheng has? 10 days? 5 days? This, Lord Chunshan paused again. He knew that he could not show weakness at this time, otherwise his only bargaining chip would be gone. He swallowed his saliva and calmly said, "As long as we defend to the death, there will always be a way. This reason is not enough." Ouyang Shua shook his head. Lord Chunshan was helpless. He knew that he did not have the capital to bargain with Ouyang Shua now. If Ouyang Shua said it was not enough, then it was not enough. After thinking for a while, he said, "As long as Pengcheng is not destroyed, we cannot rule out the possibility of Qin, Tang and Song supporting Handan. Accept my submission, and there will be no more variables in the Battle of Great Zhou." Hearing this, Ouyang Shua nodded. The brave Tiger Army was like a hot knife through butter on the battlefield in Ludong. The Hudong Army had bypassed the Northern Frontier Army's advance in Jingdu Province, but they were very cautious and were still contending with the Great Zhou Imperial Army around the border. There were 2 reasons. Firstly, the capital province was the foundation of the Zhou dynasty after all. Its welfare was relatively good and the people were stable. Even though a large-scale riot had broken out in Ludong Province, the capital province was still very calm. Secondly, he was worried that the allied forces of the 3 states would send reinforcements to Handan. In order not to fall into the enemy's trap, the 2 armies could only fight steadily and not advance too quickly. Just as Lord Chunshan said, once the Danyang army surrendered, Ludong Province would belong to the Great Xia. When the brave Tiger Army moved north, Qin, Tang and Song would not get involved in this mess. Chapter 1242. "Then, what do you want?" Ouyang Shua asked. Hearing this, Lord Chunshan was taken aback. Honestly speaking, before the call, Lord Chunshan had anticipated this. But after this conversation just now, he instantly lost his confidence. "Can I get the same treatment as Xiongba?" Lord Chunshan probed. Xiongba was not only the governor of the Great Xia. His entire clan, as long as they were truly talented and not a spoiled brat, could obtain an official position in the Great Xia. This was already very good. Furthermore, there was news that Ouyang Shuo would put Xiongba in an important position in the future. No. Ouyang Shuo decisively refused. Lord Chunshan really had the nerve to open his mouth. At that time, Xiongba's submission would directly shake the foundation of the Great Zhou, directly or indirectly weakening the Great Zhou dynasty's power by more than half. It could be said that Xiongba's clan deserved such treatment, not to mention Xiongba's own ability. How could Lord Chuanshan's submission be compared to Xiongba's? Then what about the same treatment as Wolf Warrior? Lord Chunshan asked for the next best thing. Ouyang Shuo saw this and really admired Lord Chuanshan's bargaining ability. He did not intend to dilly-dally and straightforwardly said, "Let's put it this way. After submitting to the Great Xia, you and your clan should focus on business. Don't get involved in the muddy waters of politics. It is not suitable for you." Hearing this, Lord Chuanshan's face paled. After a long while, he said, "No room for discussion?" Ouyang Shuo shook his head. "Either accept or meet on the battlefield." Seeing that Lord Chunshan was still unresigned, Ouyang Shuo added, 6 years as a lord is enough to prove that you and your clan are not suited to managing a territory. Returning to the business domain that you are most proficient in, although there will be a period of loss in the long run, it may not necessarily be a bad thing." Lord Chunshan was silent. Looking back at his career as a lord, his most glorious moment was when he fought against Di Chen, successfully split the Handan 6 hegemons, and formed the Spring and Autumn Alliance. Now that he thought about it, it was really a long time ago. At that time, Xiongba had relied on Lord Chuanshan's support to obtain a ticket to the game. Now, things remained the same, but the people had changed. In 6 years, I have not truly won even once. Lord Chuanshan's face was full of bitterness. Pausing for a moment, Lord Chuanshan's face revealed a resolute expression. "I agree to your conditions." As he said these words, Lord Chuanshan actually felt incomparably relaxed, as if a huge rock had been removed. Ouyang Shuo looked at him with an astonished expression and smilingly said, "That's right. In return, all of your family's properties in the Great Zhou dynasty will be protected. I won't touch a single thing." "Thank you." Lord Chuanshan expressed his sincere thanks. To be able to preserve this family business, he could finally account to his clan. The only thing that Lord Chuanshan deeply regretted was that he had previously promised Di Chen that he would hand over his family's base to the Great Song. If he had known this would happen, he would have chosen to submit to the Great Xia. His gains would have been far greater than what he had now. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Finally, Lord Chuanshan said, "Can I ask, how are you going to deal with Huitong Money House?" Although Huitong Bank had lost the competition with 4 Seas Bank 2 years ago, it had to be said that it was precisely because of the competition between them that Huitong Bank became the second largest bank in China. This was a big deal. Ouyang Shuo replied, "It's very simple. Huitong Bank will invest and buy back all the shareholders' shares. Then, it will be written off and renamed Huitong Bank. It will also be the 4th bank in the Great Xia. In return, your family can own 10% of Huitong Bank's shares." Lord Chuanshan nodded heavily. He was already very satisfied with this result. As the victor, the Great Xia could eat up Huitong Bank until not even dregs were left. Clearly, Ouyang Shuo understood a win-win situation. Then, it's settled. Lord Chuanshan looked at Ouyang Shuo with a complicated expression. He took a deep breath, as if to bid farewell. He solemnly bowed. "Your Majesty." In the video call, Ouyang Shuo nodded. At this moment, Ouyang Shuo seemed to be witnessing the passing of an era. Although this era still had some lingering glory, it would eventually fade and no one would be able to reverse it. Unexpected, but also not unexpected. On the 21st of May, under Lord Chuanshan's orders, the Danyang army surrendered and gave up Peng City. During this period, Di Chen was not satisfied and wanted to use the chess pieces planted in the Danyang army to start a mutiny. In the end, it did not cause any big waves and was quickly suppressed in a bloody manner. On that day, the entire Ludong province fell into the hands of the Great Xia. The destruction of the Great Zhou was a foregone conclusion. The next day, Sun Bin left the Fifth Army behind to watch over the Danyang army. He then commanded the four armies and led them north, preparing to advance into the capital province and form a three-pronged attack. Capital province, Handan City. After learning of Lord Chuanshan's treason, Di Chen did not even have the strength to be angry. He did not even kill the members of Lord Chuanshan's family in the capital province. It was for no other reason than to leave a way out for the family. Now that the situation had developed to this stage, it was necessary to leave a way out. In the future, the Di family might have to rely on these traitors to continue surviving in the game world. After learning of the situation in China, Jack had contacted Di Chen and said that the Forest Empire was willing to accept the Di family. But Di Chen would not go. Even if he was willing, his grandfather would not be able to take it. Jack looked like he was being kind, but who knew what he was up to? If he really went, given the animosity between the two families, he would be at the mercy of others. Di Chen had played this kind of trick many times. Right now, the only ones who could save the Great Zhou were Qin, Tang, and Song. Unfortunately, when the war started, the Great Song had already made it clear that they would not send reinforcements to Handan City. This was because the Great Song had to face the deterrence of the Yulin Royal Guards and the Xiangjiang army. They could not even protect themselves, so how would they have the strength to support the Great Zhou? Qin and Tang, on the other hand, were willing to send 100,000 troops each. Both countries were confident that they could use 400,000 troops to defend against the threat of a Great Xia army. Emperor Qin and Emperor Taizong also knew that saving the Great Zhou was equivalent to saving themselves. But the situation of the war was developing too quickly. First, there was an unexpected, large-scale riot in the Ludong province. This allowed the Great Xia army to travel unimpeded in the Ludong province. They did not have to worry about the supply route being cut off. Then, there was the compromise of Lord Chuanshan and the surrender of the Danyang army. In just half a month, the Great Zhou dynasty had lost an arm and was on the verge of death. Faced with the attack of the three armies of the Great Xia, even if Qin and Tang sent 200,000 troops, it would be of no use. Giving up the Great Zhou was an inevitable choice. Peerless Elegance walked into the royal study. She had just represented the Great Zhou dynasty to negotiate with the envoys of the three countries, asking them to send reinforcements to Handan City. Di Chen looked up and asked, how was it? He himself had already given up hope. Indeed, Peerless Elegance shook her head in silence. Di Chen was dejected. They had really reached a hopeless situation and could not see any hope. Instead, Di Chen calmed down and walked to the window. Looking out at the clouds, he muttered, since this is the case, then send someone to negotiate with the Great Xia. Let's see what the outcome is. Okay. Peerless Elegance nodded and turned to leave. Di Chen's voice came from behind. Do you think the old fox will negotiate with us? Peerless Elegance paused for a moment. Without turning around, she said, he will. Her tone was very firm. Following which, she walked out of the royal study and disappeared from Di Chen's sight. In the silent royal study, a long sigh could be heard. Chapter 1243. May 22nd, Jingshi. The Great Zhou wants peace talks? Ouyang Shuo asked. Yes. The one who replied was Zhang Yi. Unlike Xiongba and Lord Chuanshan, Di Chen did not contact Ouyang Shuo through a communication compass. Instead, he used formal diplomatic channels to negotiate. Then let's talk. Ouyang Shuo said lightly. Zhang Yi asked carefully, May I ask what instructions your majesty has? Have the Great Zhou surrender unconditionally? This. Zhang Yi looked troubled. This was not a peace talk. This was a forced surrender. How could they talk? That's it, Ouyang Shua said without hesitation. Yes, Your Majesty. Zhang Yi left helplessly, thinking about how to complete this task. The next day, Handan City. In the royal study, Di Chen's face was red. He asked uncertainly, did he really say that? Yes. Peerless Elegance was also surprised. Logically, if Ouyang Shua could accept Lord Chuanshan's surrender, he should be able to accept Di Chen's as well. She did not know why he was so resolute. Di Chen gnashed his teeth and said, "The old fox is determined to kill me." "Then what do you plan to do?" Di Chen was silent. He was angry, but he could only be angry. There was no other way. "If you push me too far, I'll just fight to the death." Di Chen's eyes were filled with madness. Peerless Elegance shook her head. "Don't be impulsive. If we really fight, the fish will die, but the net will not break." Di Chen felt extremely embarrassed. How could he not understand this logic? But apart from this, was there any other way out? Fighting to the death was just to defend the last glory of the clan. Thinking of how he had fought for 6 years and ended up like this, Di Chen felt like a knife was being twisted in his heart. "Then tell me, what should we do?" Di Chen was disappointed. Peerless Elegance was silent for a while. She said uncertainly, "Do you think he is testing us?" "Testing? Is there a need?" "He's doing this on purpose to humiliate me." "I don't think so." Perhaps it was because Peerless Feng Hua was not involved in the situation, but she could see more clearly than Di Chen. After Di Chen's interruption, she was even more certain of her previous judgment. She said, with his current status, he shouldn't be so bored as to joke around with the lives of millions of soldiers just to vent his anger. Given the valiant strength of the Great Zhou Imperial Guards, the Great Xia army wouldn't be able to retreat unscathed if both sides were to fight. Really? Di Chen's face was full of self-mockery. In this way, he didn't even have the qualifications to make Ouyang Shua angry. Peerless Elegance opened her mouth to speak, but swallowed her words. At this time, Di Chen didn't need any consolation or sympathy. "I'm guessing that he wanted us to surrender unconditionally to test us." Di Chen's eyes became serious. He pulled himself together and thought about what Peerless Elegance had said. After a while, he said, "You mean that the old fox doesn't trust us, and wants to use this method to destroy our last hope?" Peerless Elegance nodded in satisfaction. A sober Di Chen was still very powerful. "That's the only thing that makes sense. Honestly speaking, given our 6 years of confrontation, it's understandable that he doesn't trust us," Peerless Elegance analyzed. "Oh," Di Chen laughed at himself. "So, the old fox still thinks of me as an opponent." "That's true. Think about it. If the Huaxia region didn't have Di Chen, and if there wasn't the Yan-Huang alliance, the Great Xia might be able to get to where it was today, but it wouldn't be able to get to where it was so fast and so solid. Both sides were originally whetstones for each other. It was just a pity that there could only be one winner in this confrontation, and Di Chen happened to be the losing side. That was all. Di Chen once again came to the window and stood for a while before he made up his mind. "Since that's the case, then let's fulfill his wish. I agree to the Great Xia's conditions." Peerless Elegance nodded, and for the first time, a trace of sorrow flashed in her eyes. "Also, tell them that I will personally present the Great Zhou Imperial Seal and the Imperial Seal to Emperor Xia." This, Peerless Elegance was really surprised and said bitterly, "You don't have to do this." Anyone could see how painful it was for Di Chen to make such a decision. There was nothing more humiliating than bowing to the opponent he had fought against for 6 years. Di Chen waved his hand. "You don't have to persuade me anymore. I've made up my mind. Since this is what he wants, then I'll give him face and treat it as the last thing I do for the family." He was a member of the family in life, and a ghost of the family in death. Even if he had reached the end of the road, as the representative of the family, Di Chen had to shoulder the responsibility. This was the destiny of a member of an aristocratic family, and it couldn't be avoided. "I'll go talk to them." Peerless elegance held back the tears in her eyes, turned around, and left. On the 25th of May, the Great Zhou Empire unconditionally surrendered to the Great Xia Empire. The Imperial Guards, who were still fighting, surrendered to the Great Xia Army and voluntarily accepted the reorganization of the Great Xia Empire. When the news came out, the whole of Huaxiao was silent. Whether it was the Great Xia players or the Great Zhou players, they didn't make a sound, nor did they ridicule. They just silently watched the quietly passing of an era. At this moment, Xiong Ba of Minan, Wolf Warrior of Fengjun, and Lord Chunshan of Ludong all silently stopped what they were doing and gazed at the distant north. Their expressions were complicated, and their figures were bleak. There was also wandering fantasy and military killer. For them, the Great Zhou dynasty had a special memory. It was the place where all their dreams began and also the place where all their dreams ended. Ironically, they also played a part in the process of ending the Great Zhou dynasty. Just like Xiongba, when he decided to submit to the Great Xia, he had already predicted that the Great Zhou dynasty would end up like this. But when the day really came, he didn't feel the slightest bit carefree, only a lingering melancholy. It wasn't just them. Bai Hua, Feng Chihuang, Sijing Lion, Taowu, and the others all had complicated feelings. Although they were no longer lords, they were still former members of the Mountain and Sea Alliance. They still had enough respect for the Yan-Huang Alliance. To respect one's opponent was to respect oneself. With the surrender of the Great Zhou dynasty, the confrontation between the two alliances finally came to an end. Looking back, the two alliances had already disappeared. In the land of Huaxia, there was only one territory, and it was called the Great Xia. It was their common home. I thought this day would come, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. Bai Hua sighed. Bai Hua still remembered that in the first year of Gaia, the Mountain and Sea Alliance held their first alliance meeting in Mountain and Sea Town to discuss the first battle, the Battle of Zhuolu. At that time, the Yellow Emperor Alliance was still a huge mountain pressing down on them. That day was also May 13th of May. What a coincidence! Bai Hua remembered it clearly. At that time, Lingxi Town had taken the initiative to seek an alliance with Mountain and Sea Town because the two territories were in the same region. They wanted to help each other, but who would have thought that there would be such a huge battle later on? It was also from that day onwards that the group followed Ouyang Shua and began a magnificent journey of hegemony. They repeatedly defeated the Yellow Emperor Alliance on the battle map and constantly expanded in the wilderness. Until today, when the Great Zhou Empire unconditionally surrendered to the Great Xia. History was like a cycle, and no one could predict its ending, but it was there. At that time, they only treated Ouyang Shua as a nominal alliance leader and a friend. Who would have thought that the Mountain and Sea Town would create such a world-shaking business in Huaxia? 6 years seemed like it was just yesterday. But in reality? Everything was the same, but the people were different. The once glorious 6 hegemons of Handan could only submit to the Great Xia, either to help Ouyang Shua or to fade into the crowd. They no longer had the pride of the past, and all they could do was struggle to survive. On the other hand, the original members of the Mountain and Sea Alliance, except for those who fell behind midway, had all grown to become powerful figures. Bai Hua had even reached a position that she had never dared to imagine in the past. 6 years ago, or even 3 years ago, who could have imagined such a situation? It had to be said that Ouyang Shua was a person who created miracles, and the Great Xia was a land of miracles. In this vast and boundless land, there were always miracles happening. As the sun set in the west, the afterglow completely vanished into the distant horizon. Tomorrow the sun will still rise, won't it? Bai Hua took one last look at the distant horizon, and turned back to her seat. As the southern border protector, the burden on her was not light, and she could not slack off or be emotional. Especially when Chao Qian was exiled not long ago, it cast a shadow over Bai Hua's career. Bai Hua did not want to explain anything, nor would she plead for Chao Qian. He only had himself to blame. Bai Hua also did not know if the emperor had any thoughts about her because of this matter. The only thing she could do was to fulfill her duties. Chapter 1244. 28th of May, Handan City. After the great Xia army took over Handan City, Ouyang Shuo arrived. In the square in front of the palace, Di Chen, dressed in a white robe, bowed and presented the letter of credence and the jade seal. Ouyang Shuo nodded calmly. Su Chu accepted it on his behalf and completed a simple surrender ceremony. Although the ceremony was short, those who witnessed this historic moment would never forget it. Inside the palace, Ouyang Shuo met Di Chen alone. This was the first time they met alone, and the atmosphere was a little awkward. As long as the Di family is capable, they can serve in the Great Xia. I can also let bygones be bygones for what they did in the Great Zhou dynasty. Ouyang Shuo reassured Di Chen right from the start. Obviously, he had no intention of making things difficult for the Di family. The restrictions on the aristocratic families were calculated from the time the Great Zhou dynasty joined the Great Xia dynasty. Ouyang Shuo had long understood that in order to be tolerant, one must learn to look forward. Ouyang Shuo was very satisfied with Di Chen's tactfulness. What Ouyang Shuo wanted to destroy was the Yan-Huang alliance as a whole, not an individual. Di Chen heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. This time, he had made the right bet. Before entering the room, Di Chen was still worried that Ouyang Shuo would take this opportunity to trample on the Di family. His sacrifice of dignity had finally paid off. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Di Chen said awkwardly. It was obvious that he was not used to the relationship between them. "What about yourself? What are your plans?" Ouyang Shuo asked. "Me?" Di Chen was surprised. He did not think that Ouyang Shuo would appoint him to an important position. "I want to rest for a while," Di Chen said. Ouyang Shuo smiled. Di Chen was retreating in order to advance. Given Di Chen's strong character, how could he really be idle? He could not stand being outdone by Xiongba. "In that case, there is a position that is very suitable for you. I intend to appoint you as the deputy of the office of Chamberlain. As a special envoy of the imperial court, you will be responsible for contacting the dynasties around the world and conveying my goodwill to them. What do you think?" The office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was a second-rank organization and was under the direct leadership of Ouyang Shuo. The office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies had one official, Zhang Yi, who was a second-rank official. The junior minister was Violet, who was also the director of the External Affairs Department, and was a third-rank official. Below them were the Chamberlain of Dependencies, a fourth-grade official, and the Registrar, a fourth-grade official. Although the Chamberlain of Dependencies was only a rank 4 official and could not be compared to a provincial governor, he was in the center of the royal court and was also a special envoy of the royal court. In terms of actual authority and influence, he was not inferior to a provincial governor. To Di Chen, it was still very tempting. Ouyang Shuo wanted to use Di Chen's identity as a former core member of the Silver Hand to establish a normal communication channel with the Silver Hand. Only Di Chen was qualified for this task. The establishment of communication channels was a crucial step for Great Xia's global strategy. Ouyang Shuo was very self-aware. He knew that no matter how strong Great Xia was, it was impossible for them to unify the entire world within 3 years. In order to achieve the goal of disintegrating the Silver Hand and the Azure Badge, they could only start from the inside, divide and sow discord, and then cooperate with the external war to eliminate the thorns. Only by working on both sides could it be effective. "Yes, Your Majesty." Di Chen was not pretentious and readily accepted the position. Ouyang Shuo nodded and let Di Chen withdraw first. When Di Chen left, Peerless Elegance walked into the room. The two of them passed each other, as if indicating the end of this monarch and subject friendship. Sit! The name of peerless elegance resounded like thunder in Ouyang Shua's ears. Among the three great women of Huaxia, peerless elegance was the best. She was also the most important strategist by Di Chen's side. Although she could not save the fate of Great Zhou, peerless elegance's value could not be denied. Ouyang Shua had no intention of exploring peerless elegance's mysterious background, nor would he gossip about the special relationship between her and Di Chen. Ouyang Shua was only concerned about whether this person could be used by the royal court. Peerless elegance was undoubtedly stunning, but Ouyang Shua was calm. Di Chen has just agreed to take up the position of Honglu deputy as a special envoy of the royal court. He will travel around the world and establish a communication channel between the royal court and the dynasties of the Silver Hand. What is your choice? Ouyang Shua asked. Peerless elegance had two choices in front of her. One was to not seek any official position and be willing to continue serving Di Chen as a shadow. The other was to take this opportunity to be independent and hold a post in Great Xia. At the moment when Great Zhou was destroyed, I was a free person, peerless elegance replied. Outsiders might not know, but when she first entered the game, peerless elegance and Di Chen had an agreement. She would serve Di Chen in the game world for 10 years, and when she reached Hope Planet, she would regain her freedom. However, things were unpredictable. It was only the 7th year of Gaia, and Great Zhou was annihilated. With Di Chen's current status, if he still brought peerless elegance with him, it would be too much of an eyesore. It would not be beneficial for Di Chen to regain a foothold in Great Xia. Therefore, the two of them agreed yesterday that from now on, they would go their separate ways. Returning your freedom in advance is the last thing I can do for you, Di Chen said. Although she said this, peerless elegance was still very melancholic. Although she had obtained her freedom in advance, it was impossible to say that she did not have any feelings for him after being together for 6.5 years. This was fate. Ouyang Shua did not care about peerless elegance's melancholy. After thinking for a while, he said, "If that's the case, there will be a place for you in the Secret Texts Pavilion. The gathering of China's 3 female Zhuge scholars in Great Xia's Secret Texts Pavilion will be a good story." Your Majesty trusts me so much? Peerless elegance was very surprised. Everyone knew that although the Secret Texts Pavilion was not famous and its official rank was not high, it was the central organization closest to Ouyang Shua. Those who could hold a post in the Secret Texts Pavilion were all people that Ouyang Shua trusted. Currently, there were 4 scholars in the Secret Texts Pavilion, and each of them was in charge of a post. Palm Seal Scholar Qing Yi was in charge of the overall situation. Scholar Su Zhou was in charge of drafting memorials. Feng Qinyue, who had been promoted to scholar, was in charge of administrative documents and organizing memorials. Bai Nanpu, who had also been promoted to scholar, was also in charge of announcing the imperial edict. Every scholar was assigned 2 secretaries, and every secretary was assigned 2 clerks. 4 scholars, 8 secretaries, and 16 secretaries formed the Secret Texts Pavilion. They controlled the central secrets of the Great Xia Empire and served Ouyang Shua alone. I can use Feng Qinyue, so I can use you. Peerless elegance was silent and did not pursue the matter. With her intelligence, she naturally knew that this was just an excuse by Ouyang Shua. Before Feng Qinyue entered the Secret Texts Pavilion, she had stayed in Shu for half a year to test her loyalty. Now Ouyang Shua directly skipped this test. It was not that he was bewitched by peerless elegance's beauty or anything else. It was simply because Great Xia was unprecedentedly strong today, and he had the confidence to use this person. If peerless elegance dared to have disloyal thoughts, it was undoubtedly playing with fire. Chapter 1245. Before you go to the Secret Texts Pavilion, I hope that you can assist Shin Buhai in bringing Imperial Wind into the Mountain Sea Guards. Is that all right with you? Ouyang Shua asked. Taking over the Great Zhou dynasty was far more complicated than taking over Sui and Shu. As the only player territory that could compete with the Great Xia, there were not only many families in the Great Zhou dynasty, but there were also players' guilds, including many super guilds. Other than that, there was also the terrifying Imperial Wind. The most beautiful thing that Imperial Wind did was to poison Feng Qiuhuang to death. This was a super intelligence agency that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Mountain Sea Guard. If Ouyang Shuo couldn't use it, then he could only get rid of it. The problem was that an intelligence agency was not so easy to get rid of. Only a few people knew about the secret agents and strongholds. They could easily change their identities and hide their track. Once they hid, there would be endless trouble. That was why Ouyang Shuo wanted to use Di Chen and Peerless Elegance to take over the intelligence agency. This was the true test of Peerless Elegance's loyalty. The Mountain Sea Guards were not completely clueless about Imperial Wind. If Peerless Elegance played tricks on this matter and the Mountain Sea Guards found out, not only would she have no place in the Great Xia, but the entire Di family would also be affected. Even without Ouyang Shuo saying much, Peerless Elegance knew the stakes. "Don't worry, Your Majesty. I'll get it done." As the owner of Imperial Wind, Peerless Elegance hoped that it would have a good ending. Ouyang Shuo nodded in satisfaction. He didn't mention to Peerless Elegance that if she did this well, she would be in charge of the intelligence in the Secret Texts Pavilion in the future. In Handan City, other than Di Chen and Peerless Elegance, Ouyang Shuo didn't see anyone else. During this period, the other small and medium-sized families, the president of Unhindered Sword Qi, the president of 18 Steeds of Swallow and Cloud, the president of Embroidered Uniform Guards, the president of Laojun Temple, the president of Purple Thunder Alliance, and the president of Purple Thunder Alliance, such as the representatives of the other small and medium-sized families, were all rejected. Although Ouyang Shuo didn't want to settle scores with these small and medium-sized families, he didn't want to promote them either. He dismissed all of them and hired them according to the recruitment rules of Great Xia. As Great Xia fully opened up to the players, the imperial court was already very familiar with such recruitment. This also meant that from now on, these aristocratic families could forget about obtaining any special privileges in the Xia kingdom. Not only that, if the descendants of the aristocratic families dared to act as recklessly as before, they would be punished by the Great Xia Code. The law was merciless. Ouyang Shuo was not Di Chen. He had absolute authority in Grand Xia. These small and medium-sized aristocratic families did not have the qualifications to disrupt the order that Ouyang Shuo had painstakingly established. Ouyang Shuo was neutral when it came to the aristocratic families, but when it came to the super guilds, he wanted to get even with them. He was especially merciless when it came to the traitor of the League of Mountains and Seas, Laojun Guan. Ouyang Shuo ordered the guilds to follow the example of the Baleful Blood mercenary group. Within a week, they would disband themselves and their personnel would be distributed to various posts in Great Xia. Otherwise, he would be expelled from Great Xia. The traitor Taoist priest Azure Bull was blacklisted by Ouyang Shuo. He was immediately executed and then banished. Being expelled from Great Xia was basically equivalent to being expelled from Huaxia. The outcome could be imagined. Ouyang Shuo wanted to punish the chicken to warn the monkey. He did not want to give these guilds the slightest bit of hope. They could either give up their power and integrate into the system of Great Xia or get lost. Of course, Ouyang Shuo still had a sense of propriety. He only attacked the higher-ups of the guilds, especially the presidents of these guilds. He treated the other members of the guilds equally, except for those who had obvious bad records. With such a two-pronged approach, these super guilds had no choice but to disband. The cabinet would be in charge of how to take over the capital province and Ludong province. There was no need for Ouyang Shuo to personally intervene. Therefore, on the 1st of June, Ouyang Shuo returned to the capital. Ouyang Shuo had to appoint the governors of the two provinces. The capital province and Ludong province were the top provinces in Huaxia. Not only were they geographically superior, but they were also rich in resources. They also had a deep foundation. Ouyang Shuo naturally had to be cautious about the choice of governors. After thinking for 2 days, Ouyang Shuo finally made up his mind. On the 3rd of June, the imperial court issued a series of appointments and removals for the two provinces. Wang Shou was relieved of his position as the governor of North Incheon province and transferred to the governor of the capital province. The vacant position of governor of North Sichuan was given to the governor of Jiaozhou of the Lingnan province, Song Wan. Wang Shouren, also known as Wang Yangming, was a true genius who excelled in both the pen and the sword. Even rarer was that he possessed both ability and integrity. He was deeply trusted by Ouyang Shuo, allowing him to manage North Sichuan province to flourish. In the recent storm at the Supreme Court, Wang Shouren had been a clear-cut supporter of the local governors. This transfer to the capital was undoubtedly a new challenge for Wang Shouren. This was because the capital province was adjacent to the Mongolian Empire and would become the front line of the imperial court's war against the Mongols. More importantly, the capital province was the center of the entire north. It had an outstanding strategic position and extraordinary significance. Ouyang Shuo was very reassured by having Wang Shouren oversee the capital. 2 years ago, Song Tianxiong had attempted to interfere in the storm over Ouyang Shuo's children, which had displeased Ouyang Shuo and even implicated Song Wan. Not only had Ouyang Shuo reprimanded him, he had even ordered that Song Wan not be promoted. Only today was Ouyang Shuo able to promote Song Wan. After experiencing such setbacks, Ouyang Shuo believed that Song Wan had grown up and clearly understood who he should be loyal to between his family and the imperial court. This time, he promoted Song Wan as an explanation to his wife, Song Jia, so that she wouldn't be put in a difficult position. The imperial court issued an imperial edict to relieve Sun Yanong of his post as the prefectural governor of South Sichuan province and promote him to the governor-general of Ludong. After Gu Xiuwen and Cui Shaoxi, Sun Yanong became the third indigenous governor. At this point, the civil officials of the indigenous people were like rising stars in the officialdom of Great Xia, becoming a force that couldn't be ignored. Standing behind them was Ouyang Shuo. Apart from the two governor-generals, the prefectural governors, prefectural magistrates, and even some county magistrates of the two provinces would be replaced. The descendants of the aristocratic families would all be taken down and replaced with officials who were trusted by the imperial court. In the face of the powerful Great Xia, these aristocratic families were powerless to resist. After the appointment of the governor-generals, the takeover of Great Zhou was basically set. Next, it was time to settle the prisoners of war. Because no war had broken out, according to the post-war statistics, after the various divisions of the Great Xia army had replenished their losses, there were still a total of 650,000 soldiers waiting to be reorganized. Just like before, Ouyang Shuo wasn't in a hurry to reorganize the army. Because the war to eradicate Great Zhou was carried out exceptionally smoothly, there were basically no major wars. Ouyang Shuo made a prompt decision and was prepared to follow up the victory by attacking the remaining 3 nations. Chapter 1246. With the surrender of the Great Zhou, the so-called alliance of the 4 countries was already dead. While rushing to Handan City, Ouyang Shuo ordered the Chamberlain of Dependencies to send envoys to Qin, Tang and Song, asking them to seriously consider submitting to the Great Xia. The Great Xia's unification of China is unstoppable and cannot be reversed by human power. I do not wish for the people of China to face the threat of war after resisting the natural disaster. If the kings of Qin, Tang and Song, are willing to submit, I will treat them with respect. I hope you will consider it carefully and give me an answer. Ouyang Shua said. On the 1st of June, Ouyang Shua returned to the capital, and so did the envoys. On the 5th of June, a week had passed since the envoys left, but there was still no reply from the three countries. Ouyang Shua realized that the three countries would not give up until they saw the coffin and were prepared to fight to the death. The emperor's attachment to power was far deeper than Ouyang Shua imagined. He would rather die than submit. Since that was the case, he could only see the truth on the battlefield. On the 10th of June, after a short rest, the Hudong army returned to Hudong province. Together with the Soaring Eagle army, they launched a pincer attack on the Qin dynasty from the east and west. Han Xian was still leading the Leopard army to monitor the Tang dynasty. To be on the safe side, Ouyang Shua ordered the Red Eagle army to lead the Second Corps of the Brave Tiger army westward from Ludong province to the Central Plains province to assist the Leopard army in deterring the Tang dynasty. Needless to say, Ouyang Shua's target was the Song dynasty. In order to reduce casualties, they had to pick on the weak. Among the three countries, the Song dynasty may have the largest territory, but in terms of overall national power, it was the weakest. Firstly, when Lord Chunshan retreated from Jinshu province, he brought half of the province's essence to Ludong province, leaving behind half an empty shell. Moreover, the Song dynasty had only taken over Ludong province for half a year and suffered from a rare natural disaster. They suffered heavy losses and had a weak foundation. Unlike the Qin and Tang dynasties, although they only occupied half a province, they had cultivated for 2 to 3 years. Secondly, compared to the Qin and Tang dynasties, the Song dynasty lacked famous generals and their soldiers lacked courage. The Qin dynasty had Wang Jian and Wang Ben, but the Tang dynasty was even more impressive. Even without the god of war Li Jing, they still had Li Ji, Ho Junji, Yuqi Jingde and Qing Yaojin. In comparison, the only general that the Great Song could send out was probably the Emperor Zhao Kuangyin. In order to destroy Great Song, Great Xia was prepared to mobilize the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd legions of the Yulin Royal Guards, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th legions of the Xiangjiang Army, and the 1st, 3rd, and 4th legions of the Brave Tiger Army. A total of 10 legions, 700,000 soldiers. Throughout the middle of June, Great Xia was making final preparations for the War of Annihilation and the possible war between Qin and Tang. By the 25th of June, all the armies were in place. The rations and resources were also in place. A great battle was about to break out. On the 26th day of the 6th month, Suda commanded 3 corps of the Yulin Royal Guards and charged into Jinshu province from the border of Xiangnan province. At the same time, Zhang Shutua commanded the Xiang River Army to advance from Jiangchuan province to Jingchu province. The Brave Tiger Army under Sun Bin's command charged in from the border of Ainan province. The 3 armies completely sealed off the south and east of the Song dynasty. They were prepared to advance steadily from the south to the north and from the east to the west. They were going to use the strategy of nibbling away at the Song dynasty and forcing it to surrender. Ouyang Shua was very patient. At the same time, Di Chun and Lord Chunshan, as well as Imperial Wind, who was being reorganized, used their respective influence in Jinshu province to instigate and create opportunities for the army. Zhao Kuangyin, who was unwilling to be killed, mobilized 500,000 Great Song Imperial Guards to obstruct them along the way. Looking at the situation, even if this was not an evenly matched war, it would be a protracted war. Even if Great Xia had the advantage in military strength, it would not be easy to conquer Jinshu province. Once the war dragged on, it would be a lose-lose situation. At this moment, Li Jing, who had been leading his troops to attack Tubo, finally found the ghost behind the Tubo dynasty. It was the Ashoka dynasty of the Indian region, which lived next to Tubo. Mentioning the Ashoka dynasty gave Ouyang Shua a headache. The number of players in the Indian region was similar to that of the Huaxia region, but there was only one king city, unlike the Huaxia region which had 9 king cities. Such a setting created a freak dynasty. What did it mean for 5 million imperial guards to be gathered in one city? Even in the 7th year of Gaia, the number of imperial guards of the Ashoka dynasty still reached 4.5 million. Therefore, as early as last year, Ouyang Shu realized that the biggest obstacle for Great Xia to conquer India in the future was not the Peacock dynasty, nor the Gudo dynasty, but the Ashoka dynasty that had always kept a low profile. After a few years of expansion, the Ashoka dynasty, with the king city of Delhi as its core, expanded to the surrounding areas. Today, it already occupied more than 1/3 of the territory of the Indian region. Not only was it a threat to Great Xia in the future, but it had also become a great threat to the Peacock dynasty and the Gudo dynasty. According to the information obtained by the Black Snake Guards, after the destruction of all the large territories, the Peacock dynasty and the Gudo dynasty showed signs of joining forces. Their purpose was to deal with their common enemy, the Ashoka dynasty. As long as the Ashoka dynasty existed, the two dynasties could forget about having the right to speak in the Indian region. Unexpectedly, Ashoka's ambition was so great that when the Peacock dynasty and the Gudo dynasty were joining forces, he could still find the energy to extend his tentacles into the Huaxia region. This was something that Ouyang Shu could not tolerate. After reading the battle report submitted by Li Jing, Ouyang Shu was silent for a long time before he said coldly, "Ashoka, since you've joined in, don't think about escaping unscathed. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want with 4 or 5 million troops? Men, here! Pass the order to the front line. No matter the cost, we must end the battle to destroy the Song dynasty within half a month." Yes. The Ashoka dynasty's involvement in the Tubo War made Ouyang Shu realize that he had to quickly end the war between the three countries, even if he had to pay the price of some casualties. Only then could he reorganize the army and deal with the threat of the Ashoka dynasty with all his might. Ouyang Shu was really not sure if the Ashoka dynasty would take the opportunity of the Great Xia falling into the quagmire of war to continuously increase their troops in Tubo and pose a direct threat to the Flying Bear army led by Li Jing and even the western region of the dynasty. Ouyang Shu could not take this risk. "Summon Honglu Minister Zhang Yi," Ouyang Shu ordered. Yes. After a while, Zhang Yi hurried over. Previously, the Honglu minister Zhang Yi had sent envoys to the three countries, but all of them returned with nothing. This made Zhang Yi very ashamed. As soon as he saw the emperor, he apologized to the emperor. The Honglu minister Zhang Yi did not handle this matter well. "Your Majesty, please punish me." Ouyang Shu waved his hand, not wanting to pursue this matter. He only stared at Zhang Yi and said in a deep voice, "Send another envoy to Xiangyang and tell Zhao Kuangyin that the Great Song dynasty has to surrender within 10 days. Otherwise, once Xiangyang is conquered, I will exterminate the entire Zhao family." Yes. Zhang Yi's heart trembled and his back became wet. He had never seen the emperor so angry. Chapter 1247. Delhi City, Ashoka Dynasty, India District. The young King Ashoka looked at the Huaxia battle report in his hand, his eyes gleaming. This time, the central plains of Huaxia is finally going to have a tough battle. Good, very good. Based on Ashoka's understanding of emperors and wars, it was unlikely that Great Xia and Great Song would compromise at this stage. They could only fight to the death. This would inevitably affect the attitude of the Qin and Tang kingdoms. This is our chance. Just as Ouyang Shu had guessed, Ashoka was a very ambitious emperor. 3 months ago, when the Tibetan Tsongpa contacted the Ashoka dynasty in fear, Ashoka realized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Ashoka dynasty. Once they took the opportunity to annex Tibet, the Ashoka dynasty's territory would double. No emperor would be able to resist such a temptation. Ashoka did not hesitate at all. He directly divided them into 2 batches and very generously sent 300,000 troops to the Tibetan dynasty. In the process of fighting with Great Xia's Flying Bear army, he added another 200,000 troops. This also meant that the Ashoka dynasty had deployed 500,000 troops in Tibet, which had already exceeded the number of troops of the Tibetan dynasty. In order to reduce the Tibetan dynasty's logistical burden, Ashoka did not even hesitate to mobilize rations from the country. Ashoka did not hesitate to support the Tibetan dynasty at all costs. Of course, he did not have good intentions. The so-called cooperation must be built on the basis of the equal strength of both sides. The Ashoka dynasty's army was 10 times that of the Tibetan army, and the strength of both sides was not on the same level. The huge difference in strength also meant that the Tibetan dynasty was inviting a wolf into their house. When Songtsen Gampo discovered this, it was already too late. The Ashoka dynasty's army stationed in Luaga city had already quietly controlled the city's vital points. It's easy to invite a god in, but difficult to send him away. Li Jing was an experienced general. After discovering the Tibetan army's tricks, he was not in a hurry to attack. He only set up camp at the border and closely watched the enemy, quietly investigating the enemy's strength. Seeing this, Songtsen Gampo once mentioned to Ashoka, saying, "The Tibetan crisis has basically been resolved. Thank you for the Ashoka dynasty's assistance. The Tibetan dynasty will remember this great kindness." The underlying meaning was that he hoped the Ashoka dynasty would withdraw a portion of their army. In this regard, King Ashoka pretended to be deaf and dumb. He continued to stay in the Tubo dynasty with the excuse that the troops were exhausted from the long journey and needed to rest and reorganize on the spot and replenish their supplies. It could even be said that King Ashoka had deployed 500,000 troops to the border, ready to charge into the Tubo dynasty at any time. Only when he received the news did Songtsen Gampo truly realize that something was wrong, but he was helpless. The weak Tubo dynasty was sandwiched between the two giant crocodiles of the Xia dynasty and the Ashoka dynasty. It was destined to become a victim. And the butcher's knife that Ashoka wielded was far more decisive than Songtsen Gampo had expected. On the 28th day of the 6th month, just as the Chamberlain of Great Xia sent another envoy to Great Song, the Ayutthaya dynasty sent another 500,000 soldiers to the Tubo dynasty, directly taking control of the Tubo dynasty. Songtsen Gampo had become the puppet of the Ashoka dynasty. King Ashoka's plan could not be said to be not sinister. The reinforcements that were sent previously not only controlled some of the cities, but also took this opportunity to find out the geographical information of the entire Tubo dynasty under the guidance of the Tubo Guide. In addition, the two armies fought side by side, allowing the Ashoka dynasty's army to infiltrate Tubo. Due to the secrecy of the Tubo incident, it was temporarily not discovered by the outside world. Even Ouyang Shua did not know that at the end of June, there was already a ferocious beast lurking in the western region of Great Xia. June 29, Xiangyang City, Great Song Dynasty. Ouyang Shua's 7 days of surrender caused a huge uproar in the Great Song Dynasty. The imperial court was immediately divided into two factions. One faction wanted to surrender and the other wanted to fight. It was very northern Song Dynasty. Needless to say, the faction that wanted to surrender was naturally afraid of the Great Xia army and did not want to be buried with them. This was something that could not be helped. Even the Great Zhou dynasty, which had 700,000 soldiers and was the most resolute in resisting Great Xia, had surrendered without a fight in the face of Great Xia's attack, much less the weaker Great Song. We also don't want the people of Great Song to be plunged into misery and suffering, said the minister who was in favor of surrendering. The pro-war faction was mainly composed of military generals, and their reasoning was very simple. Surrendering before the battle has even begun. Do you have any backbone? Even if we surrender, Great Xia will look down on us. Unfortunately, in the Great Song, generals had no right to speak. The real decision-maker was the group of civil officials, the great Song Emperor Zhao Kuangyin. Zhao Kuangyin was also very conflicted. On one hand, he could not let go of the pride and dignity of an emperor, and even more so, he could not let go of the foundation that he had painstakingly built up. Surrendering, he was not willing, but he also could not lower his head. But if he did not surrender, he would face the danger of being exterminated. Zhao Kuangyin did not doubt Emperor Xia's determination. If it really came to a point where they could not be separated, it was very normal for Emperor Xia to sacrifice Zhao Kuangyin's head. If it was Zhao Kuangyin, he would do the same. Zhao Kuangyin, who was in a dilemma, had no choice but to send envoys to the Qin and Tang kingdoms to seek the opinions of Emperor Qin and Emperor Taizong of Tang. If they surrendered, then all three nations would surrender at the same time. That way, they would be able to look better. If they didn't surrender, then the two nations wouldn't be able to sit idly by and watch Great Song get destroyed just because they were being monitored by the Great Xia army. When the nest is overturned, there are no intact eggs. Please think carefully. The day the Great Song is destroyed will be the day the Qin and Tang kingdoms are destroyed. Rather than surrendering in humiliation, why not fight to our heart's content? Zhao Kuangyin spoke passionately, but his real purpose was to let the Qin and Tang kingdoms share some of the pressure on the Great Song. Only he knew his real thoughts and plans. I hope it works. Zhao Kuangyin made a final struggle. Jingchu Province, Jingzhou County. After reading the Emperor's military order, the commander of the Yulin Royal Guards, Su De, shouted, "Men, here! Summon all the generals and discuss matters in the tent." "Yes, sir." No matter how the civil and military officials of the Great Song argued, after receiving the Emperor's order to conquer the Great Song within half a month, the three armies of the Great Xia moved quickly. The Emperor's military order was very clear. The army of the three armies that conquered Xiangyang City first would be heavily rewarded by the imperial court. Although the Yulin Royal Guards, the Xiangjiang Army, and the Brave Tiger Army belonged to the three armies, none of them were willing to submit to the other. In the army, strength does not depend on one's background, but on one's military achievements. For the Yulin Royal Guards, the significance of this battle was even greater. Firstly, this was the first major battle that Commander Su De had fought since joining Great Xia. Among the many famous generals in the Great Xia army, Su De really needed to use this battle to prove that he was worthy of his rank as a general and worthy of Her Majesty's high regard. Secondly, the Yulin Royal Guards was a new army. They needed this battle to complete the internal run-in and to test the results of their training. They needed to truly integrate the soldiers from various departments into a whole. In Su De's words, "I hope that after this battle, there will be no distinction between the Jin army, the Ming army, or the Sui army. We will only have one name, the soldiers of the Yulin Royal Guards." The left wing that the Yulin Royal Guards was in charge of was the most dangerous route. Not only did they have to fight against the Great Song army, but they also had to guard against the Tang army crossing the border and intercepting them. That was why Ouyang Shua gave this heavy responsibility to Su De. On the same day, Su De mobilized the entire army, declaring that they would conquer Xiangyang at all costs and show the might of the Yulin Royal Guards. Almost at the same time, the Xiangjiang army in the middle and the Brave Tiger army on the right also mobilized. The 700,000 Great Xia soldiers were like a pack of ferocious tigers baring their fangs at the Great Song Imperial Army. The battle to exterminate the Song dynasty entered its most intense phase. On the 3rd of July, the Xiangjiang army in the middle took the lead. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after a day and a half of fierce fighting, with the help of the spies in the city, and under the personal command of Zhang Xutuo, the commander of the Xiangjiang army, the army finally captured Danyang City. They beheaded more than 30,000 people and achieved a great victory. As the former capital of the territory, Danyang City was not only the second largest city in the Great Song, but it was also the strongest fortress in the south. Together with Xiangyang City in the north, they formed the cornerstone of the Great Song. In Danyang City, the Great Song stationed 150,000 imperial soldiers and stored a large amount of provisions. It was the most important bridgehead for the Song army to stop the Great Xia army from advancing north. However, Danyang City was originally under the control of Lord Chunshan. Although he was forced to hand it over to the Great Song, Lord Chunshan still had a lot of influence in Danyang City. This time, the Xiangjiang army was able to successfully conquer Danyang City because of the help from the inside. Otherwise, with the strong defense of Danyang City and the 150,000 imperial soldiers, even with Zhang Shutua's ability, it would take him at least a week to conquer Danyang City. The Great Xia army used only a day and a half to conquer Danyang City, giving the Song imperial court a wake-up call. When the news reached Xiangyang, the Song imperial court was shaken again. Chapter 1248. The fall of Danyang City was like a wake-up call to the Song dynasty. The voices of those who wanted to surrender overpowered those who wanted to fight. It seemed that surrender was the only option for the Song dynasty. However, at this moment, the news that the Indian Ashoka dynasty had taken over the Tubo dynasty and was preparing to fight with the Xia dynasty spread across the land of Huaxia. It gave Zhao Kuangyin, who was already in despair, a glimmer of hope. Wait a little longer. Maybe the Xia dynasty will retreat, Zhao Kuangyin thought. Zhao Kuangyin wanted to wait a little longer, but the other officials of the Song dynasty did not. There was only 1 day left before the surrender deadline given by the Xia emperor. The 7 days of surrender was like a butcher's knife hanging over the head of the Zhao family. In the eyes of the nobles and officials, even if the Ashoka dynasty threatened the western border of the Xia dynasty, with the power of the Xia dynasty, they could still stabilize the western defense line and take care of the Song dynasty at the same time. When that time came, they would have to die with the emperor. The Song dynasty wanted to endure, while the other side wanted to stay alive. There was an irreconcilable and life-and-death conflict between the two sides. When Zhao Kuangyin made it clear that he wanted to hold on, the conflict finally broke out. Night of July 3rd. With the support of the officials, Prince Jin, Zhao Guangyi, started a rebellion and put his brother, Zhao Kuangyin, under house arrest. History seemed to be repeating itself once again. On the 19th of October in the 9th year of the treasure, Zhao Kuangyin summoned Zhao Guangyi to the palace for a drink. On the morning of the 20th, Zhao Kuangyin suddenly died. On the 21st, Prince Jin, Zhao Guangyi, ascended the throne as Emperor Taizong of the Song dynasty. The death of Emperor Taizong and the death of Emperor Taizong of the Song dynasty left the eternal mystery of the shadow of the axe. No matter what, with the success of Zhao Guangyi's rebellion, the fate of the Song dynasty had been settled. The next morning, Zhao Guangyi represented the Song dynasty and announced that he would surrender to the Xia dynasty. The world was shocked when the news came out. Imperial City, Jingshi. The cold winter seemed to be yesterday, but in the blink of an eye it was already summer. After half a year of construction, the Imperial City's renovation project was almost completed. With the injection of a large amount of capital, the new urban area began to be revitalized and became the new engine of the dynasty's economic growth. Almost every week, new things were produced from the factories in the new urban area. In recent days, there had been a bicycle craze among the nobles of the capital, especially for young men. Riding a mountain eagle bicycle was a matter of great honor. If there were still any young masters riding horses, then they would truly be outdated. The Mountain Eagle Bicycle Factory's realization of assembly line production not only meant that bicycles would be rapidly popularized in the capital, but it also meant that a new assembly line production model would soon replace the inefficient small workshop. The industrialization of Great Xia had reached a new level. The development of the new city district was inseparable from the support of a group of people, and that was the adventurer players who had resumed their old profession. According to the statistics provided by the industry department, in half a year, 150,000 industrial workers were recruited in the new district alone. With the development of the new urban area on the fast track, the number of workers continued to increase. At the beginning of the year, Great Xia opened its doors to adventurer players. More and more players completed their identity changes. Workers, doctors, teachers, merchants, farmers, and civil servants could all find their positions in Great Xia and obtain a place for themselves. Human resources were fully released, and Great Xia's economy ushered in rapid growth. In just the past 5 months, the Great Xia Imperial Court had collected as much as 17 million gold coins in taxes. It was easy for the annual tax revenue to exceed the 200 million mark. With the help of the Great Xia Bank, the Great Xia Commercial Bank, the Great Xia Agricultural Bank, and the recently restructured Huitong Bank, the Great Xia currency was promoted. Massive amounts of gold coins were recycled, turned into gold bricks, and stored in the Great Xia treasury. When the game was released, Gaia directly injected a massive amount of gold coins into the wilderness through the drop of monsters, mission rewards, and shops in the capital, activating the entire trading system. Gold coins also became a global currency. As the game continued to move in the direction of realism, Gaia's involvement in the game continued to decrease, and the capital continued to fall. The increment of gold coins was mainly completed through the territory's gold mines. This also meant that the status of gold coins as a global currency was being challenged day by day. According to the laws of economic development, a pure hard currency like gold coins was not the best currency. It was inevitable that it would be eliminated. The dynasty that established a stable new currency system first would benefit first. As the Great Xia currency was circulated among the people, gold coins were more often used to create ornaments and not as currency. In just half a year, the gold and silver ornaments on the market increased by 4 to 5 times. This showed that the spending power of Great Xia's citizens was increasing day by day. It stimulated domestic demand and became another engine of economic growth. All in all, Great Xia was undergoing a profound internal transformation. The atmosphere of the feudal dynasty gradually faded away and was replaced by a vibrant new nation. It was also because of this that the elites of China began to take the initiative to lean towards Great Xia. The Great Xia officialdom was ushering in a change of old and new. As the emperor, Ouyang Shuo was very happy to see that the dynasty was constantly being replaced and not stagnant. He did not wish for the expansion of the imperial court to be hindered by the interests of the country. Change was the main theme of Great Xia for the past 6 months. The changes were like a dream. Just by taking a nap, one would be able to keep up with the trend. Even the Hall of Diligent Government, where Ouyang Shuo usually worked, welcomed a seemingly inconspicuous but significant change. Just a few days ago, the Construction Bureau completed the renovation of the Hall of Diligent Government according to Ouyang Shuo's instructions. The change was actually very small. It was just a large room beside the imperial study, with a long square table and sandalwood chairs. It was transformed into an ancient and very modern conference room. Ouyang Shuo called it the first conference room. From then on, whether it was military or political discussions, unless it was required by etiquette, Ouyang Shuo would not hold them in the Martial Heroic Hall or the Hall of Literary Glory. Instead, he would choose the first conference room. In the conference room, everyone sat together. There was no need to look up to the emperor, Ouyang Shuo. Ouyang Shuo also did not have the patience to sit on the cold dragon throne all day and discuss matters with the civil and military officials. The real authority of the emperor was not established through such boring ceremonies. The imperial court also welcomed a few new people. On the 15th of June, after completing the handover of the imperial style, Peerless Elegance officially took office in the Secret Literature Pavilion. Ouyang Shua appointed him as the scholar in charge of the organization of intelligence according to the agreement. In layman's terms, Peerless Elegance was Ouyang Shua's intelligence secretary. This appointment had clearly surprised Peerless Elegance, because no matter where it was, intelligence was a highly classified secret, especially when it was reported to Ouyang Shua's level. The position of intelligence secretary had to be held by Ouyang Shua's most trusted person. But Ouyang Shua had chosen Peerless Elegance, who had just submitted. Not only was Peerless Elegance surprised, the other officials were also surprised. They all looked at Peerless Elegance with strange gazes. But Ouyang Shua was unmoved. He had always adhered to a single principle: don't doubt the people you use, and don't use the people you doubt. Placing suitable talents into suitable positions was Ouyang Shua's most important and most difficult task. Peerless Elegance had been in charge of the imperial style for a long time, and he was unquestionably the best candidate for intelligence secretary. As for Peerless Elegance's loyalty, the Mountain Sea Guard was responsible for monitoring him. Before Peerless Elegance took office, Di Chen, who had rushed to the capital to take up his post, had already left the capital with a few guards to travel the world. Ouyang Shua could understand Di Chen's mood and knew that Di Chen needed some time to adjust. Thus, he did not place any hard and fast rules on Di Chen's work, only giving him some funds to work with. Di Chen had a lot of flexibility in how to operate. Ouyang Shua also believed in Di Chen's judgment of people. Since Di Chen had accepted the position of Chamberlain of Dependencies Minister and the Imperial Court's Special Envoy, he could not just sit there and do nothing. He was bound to want to achieve outstanding results in this position. All Di Chen needed was a little time to adjust. The only thing that surprised Ouyang Shua was that after the Great Zhou surrendered, old General Lien Po voluntarily gave up his military post and willingly stayed by Di Chen's side as an ordinary guard captain. Their previous relationship as ruler and official had turned into that of master and servant. Since this was Lien Po's choice, Ouyang Shua did not force it and let nature take its course. Presumably, with Di Chen's achievements, he should be able to materialize a Lien Po. Besides Lien Po, the old officials of the Great Zhou dynasty also had new posts. Advisor Fan Xing stayed in the capital to enjoy his retirement, no longer serving as an official. Great General Zhang Hongfan of the Yuan dynasty, whom Ouyang Shua despised, had tactfully left the Great Zhou on the day the Great Zhou surrendered and concealed his identity. Not everyone could adapt to the Great Xia and start a new life. With the power of the Mountain Sea Guards, they could naturally find Zhang Hongfan's hiding place. However, Ouyang Shua did not do so. Since Zhang Hongfan was very tactful, Ouyang Shua did not hesitate to spare his life. Among the old officials of the Great Zhou dynasty, only the Japanese General Toyotomi Hideyoshi was truly appointed. He was arranged by Ouyang Shua to join the Holo army and take up the position of army commander. At this point, the last trace of the Great Zhou dynasty had disappeared. The afternoon sun was still scorching. It shone through the green leaves outside the window and through the grill, casting a long shadow on Ouyang Shua's body. In front of the table, Ouyang Shua was taking a nap with his eyes closed. The Asoka dynasty's annexation of the Tufan dynasty, the Great Song dynasty's change in the palace, and the recent upheavals had caught Ouyang Shua unprepared. For a moment, he actually felt a little tired. He took the opportunity of his afternoon nap to organize his thoughts. Chapter 1249. Ouyang Shua did not expect the Tubo dynasty to be occupied by the Ashoka dynasty. Songzon Gampo resisted the Mongolian Empire in the north and defended the Great Xia dynasty in the west. In the end, he still could not escape the fate of being devoured by the giant crocodile. It was truly regrettable. Speaking of which, this was the first time a foreign force had intervened in the struggle for supremacy in Huaxia. It made Ouyang Shua feel embarrassed. Even so, Ouyang Shua had no choice but to be careful. A few days ago, Li Jing had already led the Flying Bear army back to the border of Shu. The first expedition of the Great Xia dynasty ended in failure. Li Jing asked for forgiveness but was suppressed by Ouyang Shua. Given the treacherous situation of the Tubo battlefield, it was already a very impressive achievement for Li Jing to be able to lead the Flying Bear army and retreat unscathed. How could Ouyang Shua punish this general? Before dealing with the Qin, Tang, and Song kingdoms, Ouyang Shua did not intend to start a war with Tubo. As for the Ashoka dynasty, they had to go through a process of digestion and absorption after annexing such a large territory. Furthermore, Shu was easy to defend and difficult to attack. As long as Ashoka was not too arrogant, he would not be greedy. Putting Tubo aside for the time being, Ouyang Shua focused his attention on the Qin, Tang, and Song kingdoms. As the deadline approached on the 3rd of July, Ouyang Shua was prepared to sacrifice the Zhao family of the Great Song dynasty. He did not expect a dramatic change in the Great Song dynasty the night before. Zhao Guangyi had saved the entire family. However, the people of the future would probably regard Zhao Guangyi as a traitor and Zhao Kuangyin as the saint of the generation. Ouyang Shua had no intention of investigating. He only knew that with the success of Zhao Guangyi's palace change, Jingchu province had already become the possession of the Great Xia dynasty. The Great Xia dynasty was a big step closer to destroying the three kingdoms. On the 5th of July, Jiang Shang, the chief minister of the Great Xia dynasty, led a team to Xiangyang City to accept Zhao Guangyi's surrender. Before that, the two armies had already stopped fighting. The Great Song Imperial Army at the front line surrendered and waited for the Privy Council to reorganize. After a rough calculation, there were still 380,000 Great Song Imperial Army waiting to be reorganized. Jiang Shang also brought the imperial court's grace and title. The edict conferred Zhao Guangyi the title of King Song and Zhao Kuangyin. This kind of grace was already considered the great grace of the emperor. Zhao Kuangyin, who was under house arrest, would be too insensible if he was dissatisfied. Apart from the Zhao royal family, the old ministers of the Great Song also had their own appointments. Zhao Pu was appointed as the governor of southern Sichuan, and the former governor of southern Sichuan, Fan Zhongyan, was transferred to the governor of Jingchu. In his early years, Zhao Pu was appointed by Lu Xi as a secretary and later became Zhao Kuangyin's secretary. In the 7th year of Xianda, he and Zhao Kuangyin launched the Chunqiao mutiny, overthrowing the later Zhou and establishing the Song dynasty. In the 2nd year of Qianda, he became the prime minister and assisted Zhao Kuangyin in seizing the military towns, removing the imperial guard generals from military power, implementing the garrison law, reforming the official system, and formulating many important measures to defend the borders of Liaoning. In the 3rd year of Chunhua, Zhao Pu, who had paid his respects to the prime minister 3 times, died of illness at the age of 71. He was conferred the title of Prince of Han and given the title of Zhongxian. He was also given a banquet in the Taizu Temple and was one of the 24 heroes of the Zhao Sun Pavilion. Although Zhao Pu did not read much, he liked to read the Analects of Confucius. His saying that half of the Analects of Confucius governs the world had a great impact on the later generations and became a famous saying of ruling the country with Confucianism. With Zhao Pu's talent, it was naturally not a problem for him to be appointed as the governor of a province. However, it was still unexpected for him to be appointed as the governor of southern Sichuan. Although the rumor that southern Chuan province was going to become Zhili province was suppressed by Ouyang Shua, there was no need to doubt the high status of southern Chuan province. Ouyang Shua's real purpose was to transfer Fan Zhongyan out of southern Sichuan. As Jingchu province had the royal city of Xiangyang and was a large province in the central region, Fan Zhongyan would not be wronged. Ouyang Shua hoped that through this adjustment, Fan Zhongyan would understand the hidden meaning of his warning. Other than Zhao Pu, Murong Yanzhao, Gao Huaid, Wang Shenqi, Han Lingquan, Shi Shouxin, Zhang Lingduo, Zhang Guanghan, Zhao Yanwei, and the other old ministers of the Great Song were also arranged. The Northern Song had no generals, and the Southern Song had no prime minister. Among the old ministers, Zhao Pu was the only one who truly excelled in both literature and martial arts. With the surrender of the Great Song, the situation in the Huaxia region had become clear. Now it depended on the attitude of the Qin and Tang kingdoms. Whether it was Emperor Qin or Emperor Taizong, they were not people who would easily admit defeat. It was harder to make the two of them surrender than to kill them. The capital, the imperial palace. Zhang Liang, the secretary of the secretariat, was invited to the imperial study for a discussion. Dear subject, how do you think we should deal with the Qin and Tang kingdoms? If possible, Ouyang Shua did not want to subdue the two countries through war under the overbearing situation of the Ashoka dynasty. But if they did not fight, the two countries would not surrender. This had become a dead knot. That was why Ouyang Shua asked Zhang Liang to think of a solution. Zhang Liang replied, Emperor Qin and Emperor Taizong are also heroes of their generation. They must be able to see the situation clearly and know that the situation cannot be reversed. What we need to do is to give them a way out. Ouyang Shua nodded in agreement. Dear subject, how do you think we should give them a way out? Do you want us to talk to them personally? That's not appropriate. Zhang Liang shook his head. Putting aside the fact that Your Majesty is the most respected person in the world, we cannot lower our status. If we break this rule, it will affect the arrogance of the Qin and Tang kingdoms. It will be very disadvantageous to the governance of the Guangxi province in the future. Zhang Liang's concern was not an alarmist. Both the Qin and Tang kingdoms had a group of famous civil and military officials. Moreover, the two countries had been in the Guangxi province for a long time and had deep root. If Great Xia gave the two countries too much face, it would easily give the civil and military officials and the people of the two countries the wrong impression that they were giving face to Great Xia by submitting to Great Xia. It would inevitably lead to arrogance. This was what Ouyang Shua did not want to see. Zhang Liang said, This humble subject thinks that we can start with the Ashoka dynasty. What do you mean? Ouyang Shua was a little surprised. He did not know how the two could be linked together. Whether it is Emperor Qin or Emperor Taizong, they are the emperors of China. Now that foreign enemies are knocking on China's door, if the Qin and Tang kingdoms are still immersed in internal strife, wouldn't they be letting down the name of China? This humble subject suggests that we send a high-level envoy group again and use this as a breakthrough to convince the two emperors to retreat behind the scenes. Zhang Liang said. Ouyang Shua frowned slightly. Will this work? If Your Majesty does not give up, this humble subject is willing to personally lead a team to one of the countries. All right. Ouyang Shua readily accepted the advice and decided to let Zhang Liang give it a try. On the 7th day of the 7th month, Great Xia's cabinet's second assistant minister and minister in charge of seals, Zhang Liang, led a team to the Tang dynasty. At the same time, Honglu Temple's minister, Zhang Yi, personally led a team to the Qin dynasty. In history, Zhang Yi was once the prime minister of the Qin kingdom. This diplomatic mission to the Qin kingdom could be considered as a glorious return. Ouyang Shua hoped that Qin Shi Huang would consider this and agree to retire. Ouyang Shua could put the civil and military officials in important positions, but the emperors were the absolute forbidden zone. Ouyang Shua was unwilling to touch them and would never have the intention to take them under his command. Even Xiang Yu, the overlord of Chu, was not willing to be in the hearts of the people, let alone emperors like Emperor Qin and Emperor Taizong. If he really recruited these emperors, there would be endless troubles in the future. Therefore, even if the Qin and Tang kingdoms surrendered, Emperor Qin and Emperor Taizong could only retire and be idle kings in this game world. They would no longer interfere with the state affairs and could not even touch it. As for whether there would be an opportunity in the future to instantiate these emperors on planet Hope and expand the territory, that was another matter. After all, there were still too many variables on planet Hope, and how could Ouyang Shuan know everything? During the period when Zhang Liang and Zhang Yi were on the diplomatic mission, the Great Xia army did not move and quietly waited for the results of the negotiations between both parties. If the two countries were still unwilling to surrender, Ouyang Shua could only resolve it through war in order to avoid any unforeseen circumstances. Chapter 1250. July 7th, Great Qin Dynasty, Xianyang City. In the palace, the middle-aged Qin Shi Huang stood with his back facing Qin Shi Huang as he stared at the map of China in the wilderness. Great Qin's territory was only a small piece. He asked, "Li Si, Great Xia is here. Zhang Yi is leading the team?" Just his back view alone was enough to give one immense pressure. This was the prestige of Qin Shi Huang. "Yes, Your Majesty." What did they say? Qin Shi Huang did not turn around. Li Si secretly wiped the beads of sweat on his forehead and said, They hope that Your Majesty can go into seclusion." Qin Shi Huang was silent. After a long while, Qin Shi Huang turned around and looked at Wang Jian with a cold glint in his eyes. "If we start a war with Great Xia, what are our chances of winning?" Wang Jian thought for a moment and replied, "We can fight." The meaning behind this sentence was worth pondering. In history, Wang Jian and his son massacred the 6 states due to many factors. At that time, Qin was strong and the Qin army was strong while the 6 states had been decaying for a long time and were only left with an empty shell. That was why Qin was able to unify the 6 states in a short 10 years. Qin's road to unifying the 6 states started with Shang Yang's reform and was the result of the efforts of several generations of emperors. Qin Shi Huang only completed the final blow and did not dare to be greedy. In the wilderness, Qin was trapped in a corner and the Qin army had no battle experience. Their opponent, Great Xia, had a vast territory and a strong army. Even when the Qin kingdom was at its peak in history, it was still far behind. The two were completely different in strength. That was why Wang Jian said "we can fight," implying that they could not win. Qin Shi Huang looked deeply at Wang Jian and Li Si and waved his hand tiredly. "Both of you can leave." "Yes." That night, Qin Shi Huang left behind an edict to pass the throne to his eldest son, Fu Su, before committing suicide. This was how an emperor ended his journey in the wilderness. At the last moment of his life, Qin Shi Huang looked at the sky and said, "Mother Goddess, I should not have come." Gaia was silent. At the moment Qin Shi Huang committed suicide, a huge meteor streaked across the night sky. Capital, Imperial City. Ouyang Shua, who was still reading the memorials, seemed to have sensed something. He got up and walked to the window and saw the dazzling meteor flashing past like a comet. Northwest? Ouyang Shua fell into deep thought. He wondered if it was Qin Shi Huang or Tang Taizong who had fallen. "This is not what I want, but I have no choice." At this moment Ouyang Shua was filled with melancholy. Whether it was Emperor Qin or Emperor Taizong of Tang, Ouyang Shua only had respect for them. However, the situation had forced him to do so. In this vast wilderness there was no room for both of them. On the road to hegemony, there were many such helpless choices. Tang Dynasty, Chang and City. Tang Taizong, Li Shiming, gazed at the dazzling meteor in silence. "You finally made your choice. What about me? What should I do?" Accompanying Emperor Taizong was a virtuous empress, Empress Zhangsun. "Your Majesty, this concubine has always been looking forward to accompanying Your Majesty to travel the world," Empress Zhangsun said with a smile. Li Shiming burst into laughter. "Well, it doesn't matter whether I fight for it or not. I might as well let it go." Between family and power, Li Shimin chose the latter. Holding Empress Zhangsun's warm and slender hand, Li Shimin's lips curled into a smile. On the 8th of July, young Master Fu Su ascended to the throne. On the same day, the new king of Qin, Fu Su, agreed to surrender to Great Xia's special envoy Zhang Yi. Fu Su ascended to the throne and rewrote the history of Qin, but it seemed that nothing had changed. The only change was that in the following days, Fu Su would take the title of King of Qin and lead the Ying family to continue to exist. Such an ending really made people sigh. On the 10th of July, Emperor Taizong, Li Shiming, passed the throne to Prince Jin, Li Ji, who was also known as Emperor Gaozong of Tang in history. After that, Li Shiming and his wife, Zhang Sun Wugo, disappeared from the eyes of the world and officially went into seclusion. Before going into seclusion, Li Shiming ordered Wu Zetian to die. Although the Li family could no longer be as glorious as in history, Li Shiming did not want his family to be destroyed by a woman. The two emperors expressed their pride in different ways. On the 11th of July Jingshi, Zhang Liang's plan succeeded. Great Xia conquered Qin and Tang in a peaceful way. At this point, except for the Mongolian Empire and Tubo, which was annexed by the Ashoka dynasty, the entire territory of Huaxia belonged to Great Xia. The 9 royal cities all belonged to Great Xia. It was hard for outsiders to imagine what this meant, but in the eyes of the Chinese players, this was a great achievement that could be recorded in the history book. To the Chinese, they were hopelessly obsessed with unification. In the first year of Gaia, thousands of feudal lords struggled to survive in the wilderness. To the third year of Gaia, to the battle between Great Xia and Great Zhou, and finally to Great Xia's unification of Huaxia. The entire process took Ouyang Shua less than 7 years. If it wasn't for the game time, this would be impossible. After all, the game map was expanded by 10 times, and from a small village, he had climbed step by step to the current illustrious dynasty. Ouyang Shua was destined to become a legend. When Qin and Tang successively surrendered to Great Xia, the news had already spread throughout the world and attracted the attention of various parties. Dawson Dynasty, Liberty City. After learning that Great Xia had conquered Qin, Tang, and Song, Jack was speechless for a long time. This Eastern dragon is finally going out to sea. When he said this, Jack's eyes were filled with excitement, but there was also a hint of worry. After the unification of Huaxia, the Great Xia dynasty would definitely focus on overseas expeditions in the future. They would fight head-on with the Dawson dynasty and even the entire Silver Hand. The moment that Jack had been looking forward to was finally coming, but he didn't know who would be the winner. It's time to make a good plan. Mediterranean Sea, Atlantis City. Queen Kalia stood on the tower, staring at the vast sea. Will he come back? Kalia didn't believe that Great Xia, which had suffered a huge setback in Morocco, wouldn't return to the Mediterranean Sea after unifying Huaxia. The Mediterranean Sea is going to have huge waves again. I'm really looking forward to it. As the territories in the Mediterranean Sea were annexed one by one, Atlantis was facing the attacks of the Spanish dynasty, Gaul dynasty, Caesar dynasty, Arabia dynasty, and Egypt dynasty. At this time, Kalia especially hoped to get the full support of Great Xia. It was time to stir up the stagnant Mediterranean Sea. Indian Empire, Cusco City. After receiving the news that Great Xia had conquered 3 countries, Indian King Juarez didn't know whether he should be happy or worried. He had to admit that in the past few months, the Indian Empire had been having a hard time facing the attacks of the Spanish dynasty and the Brasilia dynasty. They were already somewhat unable to control the situation. Should we let Great Xia intervene? Juarez still couldn't make up his mind. The Indians had their own pride. Chapter 1251. 15th of July Jingshi. The commotion caused by the surrender of Qin and Tang had gradually subsided, and the war in the Central Plains had come to an end. The greatest benefit of conquering Zhou, Song, Qin, and Tang was that they had gained nearly 100 million people. Including the Kenyan countries that were conquered in the African battlefield, Great Xia's population had gone up another level, breaking the 500 million mark. Be it in terms of population or territory, Great Xia had already surpassed any other dynasty in history. The sudden influx of a large number of people had also placed a certain burden on the imperial court. Fortunately, the weather was favorable this year, and the first harvest of food was bountiful, finally alleviating the hunger situation that had occurred since last winter. The natural disaster of last October had also brought about a sequela. Be it farmers or herdsmen, they had all subconsciously hoarded large amounts of food at home to prepare for the famine. In the words of the commoners, "I don't want to experience that kind of cold winter again." Following the unification of the Central Plains and the rise of peace, the commoners lived in prosperity and contentment. The indigenous population of Great Xia was about to usher in an explosive growth, becoming a new growth point for the population. Children born in the first year of Gaia had already become adults in the 7th year of Gaia. Their generation had grown up with the dynasty, and they were the most loyal and the most active generation. They were the cornerstone of the country. Just like the Shadow Guard's guardian Cui Tianqi, the youth who had come to Shanghai village had already grown into an unyielding young talent, becoming a sharp sword in the darkness of the night for Ouyang Shua. At 10 in the morning, in the imperial study, Ouyang Shua was discussing personnel arrangements with Jiang Shang, Ko Zhuan, and Zhang Tingyu. This included the arrangements for the old officials of Qin and Tang, as well as the selection of the Guangxi province's governor. In addition, there were personnel related to the Protectorate of Africa. In the past 3 months, Great Xia had launched a war of unification within the country, and the distant battlefield in Africa had not stopped. Under the command of Bai Qi, the 4 armies in the African theater of operations had won every battle. On the 10th of April, they conquered Uganda, and on the 18th, they conquered Tanzania, completing the second tier of military operations. During this period, Bai Qi had also taken advantage of the time when the army was resting to destroy 2 small countries, Rwanda and Burundi. Rwanda was bordered by Tanzania to the east, Burundi to the south, Congo to the west and northwest, and Uganda to the north. It had many mountains within its territory, and was known as the Country of Thousand Hills. Although Rwanda's land area was smaller than Jingzhou Island, it had 1 million players. It was the most densely populated country in Africa, with about 83% of the population distributed in the villages. Tungsten and forest resources were the specialties of Rwanda. As for Burundi, which bordered Rwanda, it had a slightly larger land area than Rwanda. It had around 800,000 players, and it was also mainly farming. In modern society, these small African countries did not have an industrial base, and their infrastructure was backward, so they were doing very badly. However, in the game world, the unique natural environment was a rare granary. The imperial court decided to merge Uganda into the Kenya province. At the same time, with Tanzania as the main body, it would annex the 2 small countries of Rwanda and Burundi to establish the Tanzania province, which is also the 4th province of the Protectorate of Africa. The position of Tanzania province's governor was temporarily vacant and was being taken over by the Protectorate of Africa. After a short rest, in late May, the African Theater of Operations launched the 3rd phase of military operations. This time, the targets were Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. Malawi was located in the southeast of Africa. It was a landlocked country surrounded by Tanzania, Mozambique, and Zambia. Its land area was about the same as the East Sea province, with a total of 1.3 million players. The country got its name from Lake Malawi, which was also the 3rd largest lake in Africa. It had an area of 30,000 square kilometers, and the deepest lake could reach more than 700 meters. There were many species of freshwater fish that were unique in the world. Malawi's economy was mainly based on agriculture. The main cash crops included tobacco, coffee, tea, cotton, and sugar cane. Tobacco was the most important cash crop in Malawi. Mozambique, which was next to Malawi, also bordered Lake Malawi. It was once a Portuguese colony, and its land area was about the same as the Qinghai province. There were a total of 2.5 million players. In addition, Mozambique was a coastal country, located in the southeast of Africa. The Mozambique Channel between Mozambique and Madagascar was the world's longest channel, with a total length of 1,670 kilometers. There were many rivers in Mozambique, and the climate was hot and humid. The annual average temperature was 194 degrees Celsius. There was an abundance of rain, and it was rich in marine, water, and forest resources. It was a heaven for eating tuna and seafood, and there were many species of sharks in the north. It could be said that Mozambique was a treasure trove of natural resources. It was no wonder that it was coveted by the Portuguese. Lastly, there was Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was an important birthplace of civilization in southern Africa. During the Middle Ages, there was a civilization established by the Shona people, and many cultural relics were left behind. The most important one was the ancient city of Great Zimbabwe, which was how Zimbabwe got its name. The Mohammedan Empire, which used this city as its capital, through trade with the Muslim caravans from the Indian Ocean coast, gradually became stronger in the 11th century. They used the gold, ivory, and copper produced there to exchange for raw products from the Persian Gulf region, such as cloth and glass. In the 15th century, the Mohammedan Empire had become the largest state in southern Africa. Zimbabwe was a country with a more developed industry in Africa. Manufacturing, agriculture, and mining were the three pillars of its economy. It was famous for producing high-quality crocodile skin, and was known as the home of the crocodile. Zimbabwe's land area was about the same as the Yunnan province, and it had a total of 1.4 million players. It was not difficult to find that, other than Rwanda, the countries in East Africa generally had low population density, and they were rich in natural resources. They had a history of colonization, and their industries were backward, but the climate was pleasant. All these factors made it the best raw material production base. As the first industrial revolution spread throughout the world, regions like this became a treasure land coveted by various tyrants. This resulted in the 7 Years of Gaia, where the global dynasties divided up the African continent. By the end of June, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe had all been conquered by Great Sia. The imperial court decided to annex Malawi and Zimbabwe, with Mozambique as the core, to establish the Mozambique province. At this point, Great Sia's East Africa strategy had basically come to an end. After conquering the last country, Zimbabwe, the African war zone would enter a relatively long period of rest and reorganization. They would focus on consolidating their internal defenses and would no longer wage war against other countries. There were 3 reasons for this ceasefire. Firstly, in a short period of half a year, the African war zone had consecutively conquered 9 countries. The generals and soldiers were exhausted, and the provisions provided by the imperial court had basically been depleted. They could no longer sustain the war and had to rest and reorganize. Even if they were an iron army, it was impossible for them to wage war all the time. Secondly, the Protectorate of Africa had established 4 new provinces. The territory had expanded by more than 4 times, and the population had increased by more than 30 million. The rate of expansion was too fast, and they had to stop and digest it. Otherwise, there would be endless troubles in the future. Don't forget, after conquering the 9 countries, the players of the 9 countries wouldn't be teleported to the training ground. They would still remain in their own territories. This raised a higher requirement for Great Sia's governance. The governors of the newly established Tanzang province and Mozambique province had yet to be decided. Thirdly, there was no longer any place to conquer in East Africa. To the south of the Mozambique province was the Bantu dynasty, and it was temporarily inadvisable to clash with them. To the north and east of the Protectorate of Africa was the Indian Ocean. Apart from Madagascar, Mauritius, and other island countries, there was no other place to conquer. The only target of attack could only be the west. To the west, apart from Zambia, which shared a border with Zimbabwe, the Congo, Central Africa, and other countries belonged to the Central Africa region. They were the main targets of the Dawson dynasty. While Great Xia was conquering the countries in East Africa, the Dawson dynasty had already conquered Cameroon, Gabon, and Equatorial Guinea. Their next target would most likely be the Congo. In history, the Congo had been divided into the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the game world, it was one country. Its territory was larger than 10 Yunnan provinces, and the total number of players was as high as 8 million. Regardless of whether it was the Dawson dynasty or the Great Xia, it wouldn't be easy to conquer the Congo. If both sides were to interfere with each other, the situation would become even more complicated. The Congo would most likely become the first place where the two dynasties would clash. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shua had ordered a temporary truce in the African war zone to reorganize their defenses. At the same time, he had to coordinate with the Protectorate to reorganize the internal affairs of the Protectorate and stabilize East Africa. As long as the development of East Africa was on the right track, it would be able to support the consumption of the four armies by itself, and there would be no need for resources from the Protectorate. At that time, the African war zone would truly be able to unleash their full strength and engage in a major battle. Ouyang Shua had summoned the three ministers to discuss personnel arrangements and also to discuss how to provide unprecedented assistance to the Protectorate of Africa and how to develop Africa. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.